Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the new Soulblight Gravelords Battletome. It's not quite out yet. I think it goes up for pre-order today, but it has been leaked in its entirety, and we can see all the important rules, everything we need to see. So I'm going to go through the whole book and just look at each of the changes they've made, all the sub-faction abilities, all the war scrolls, the spell laws, everything like that, and sort of give my opinions on whether they're good changes or bad changes and sort of what it means for the army. I have already looked at some of these things, and I know they're really big changes. I've been playing this army since Legions of Nagash, and the change from Legions of Nagash to Soulblight Gravelords, I'd argue, is much smaller than the change from the Soulblight Gravelords book to the new Soulblight Gravelords book. There are lots of really big changes to the way the army plays, and big shake-ups in a lot of the things that we've been asking for. So I think it's a really important one to understand in detail. And let's get straight into it. We're going to start with the allegiance abilities and the spell laws. So let's chuck that up on the screen. All right. Allegiance abilities for the Soulblight Gravelords in general for every army. There's not much change in the cursed bloodlines. You can still take things like Manfred in the Vyrkos Dynasty, for example. They don't have to have the same keyword. Nagash still can't benefit from any of these abilities. Thankfully, they've given Nagash a ward to make up for him not actually getting the ward from the Allegiance abilities. But this is the same as before, but you'll see in practice it's actually very different, and I don't think you'll see nearly as many named characters outside of their allegiance. But yeah, not too much to say about this one. This is basically the same as it was before. I'm going to talk about Endless Legions after the Unquiet Dead, because I think it sort of makes more sense once you have the context of the Unquiet Dead. This is exactly the same as it was before. There are some changes to which units are summonable, but aside from that, I think this is an identical rule. It's a very powerful rule. I wasn't sure if they would keep this. In the Legions of Nagash book, you used to have to have a hero go over to the gravesite to pull units out of it, and now you don't need to do that anymore. I think it makes the army play very differently, being able to summon units on your opponent's side of the board and being able to sort of deep strike much more easily. I'm okay to have it in there, but I just wasn't sure if they would continue with it. And yeah, it's a big, powerful ability for our army. I'm glad they kept the 12-inch as well. It's a really big difference having a 9-inch circle versus a 12-inch circle, especially with this sort of deathly invocation rule down here, and with the way Endless Legions works. So I'll move on to Endless Legions now. There's not much to see in the Unquiet Dead because it's exactly the same as before. Just worth noting that it's exactly the same as before. Whew. All right. Endless Legions. Endless Legions got a really big change. So, at the end of the movement phase, you can pick one friendly Soulblight Gravelord summonable unit that has been destroyed and roll a dice. Add one to the roll if it is your movement phase. Okay. We're changing from the end of the Battle Shock phase to the end of the movement phase. This is an enormous nerf. Your units can't shoot because you're Soulblight Gravelords. You don't have any shooting, especially you don't have any shooting on any summonable units. So even something like the zombie dragon that would otherwise have at least a breath weapon has none of those are on summonable units. So setting up at the end of the movement phase means you can't move them later. There's a restriction on charging and pile in that we'll see later. So something at the end of your movement phase kind of means that they can be in the way, but can't do anything that turn. And setting them up at the end of your opponent's movement phase means they can shoot and charge that unit, whereas in the past you would set it up at the end of their Battle Shock phase, which often meant it would go into your turn and you could move and charge with that unit before they had a chance to react to it. I'm sure that's a bit of a feels bad for opponents, and that's why they've made this change. But it is a substantial nerf to the ability. So you've got to remember it in your movement phase. The the adding one only happens in yours, so you roll it in both your movement phase and theirs, and it's slightly more likely to happen in your movement phase than in their movement phase, which I think is fine. You don't add anything for destroying units like you did in the past, and I think this was a bit of a problem for the book. That's a very win more type of ability. Like, if I can destroy my enemies, I get more models. Ends up being, well, if I can destroy my enemies, I'm going to win anyway, and then I get even more models and I win even harder. Whereas it really shouldn't be dependent on that. If most of your army is getting destroyed, which it kind of needs to be, if you're going to be summoning them back as replacement units, then chances are you're not destroying that many enemy units. And it also created this big disparity between, I'm facing an army where my opponent has lots of weak units that I can destroy with people like Manfred, or my opponent has very few units that are very durable. For example, like a Slaves to Darkness army might have big blocks of dudes that you really have no chance of killing in Soulblight. So you just wouldn't get to access your sort of core necromancy ability very often because you couldn't kill anything. And that made you feel even weaker against this thing that you already were weak against. So I'm glad for the change that it's no longer dependent on killing things. I always thought it was kind of weird. I would have liked if this wasn't a random ability, if it was more like the chaos summoning where you sort of build up points and then you spend those points. That would sort of make sense, where as things happen in the game, you build up death magic and you expend that magic to summon units back. I think the consistency would have been okay in this case. And in particular, we'll see as the rules go on, I think why the randomness is going to be a bit troublesome. And because it happens in the movement phase as well. So let's move on. If you pick a summonable unit that is not a hero on a 4+, a new replacement unit with half of the models from that unit that was destroyed, rounding up, is added to your army. That unit must be set up wholly within 12 of a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero or gravesite, and more than 3 inches from all enemy units, and it cannot attempt a charge or make a pile-in moves in the same turn. Each destroyed unit can only be replaced once. Replacement units cannot themselves be replaced. Okay. 2 really enormous things to note in that paragraph of text from the previous book. Firstly, you can have summonable heroes. Since we saw the previous Soulblight book, I've been questioning why they didn't make some of the heroes summonable, the White King in particular. But I think they've gone and done it. So I'm very happy. As soon as I saw this, I thought, fuck yes, this is something the army should have. It's not necessarily an enormously powerful ability, but it's really flavorful. And if you look at the kinds of models that we have, the White King is like the ideal candidate. He's a death rattle skeleton, like the other skeletons. He has the keyword. So why not make him summonable? I think that would be a really, really interesting, mechanically viable thing to do. And it looks like they've gone and done it. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the how you summon those. But the other big thing in here, the one that you might just gloss over if you're just reading it, and you just assume, 9 inches like everything else. Not 9 inches. 3 inches from all enemy units. That's very, very different, right? That's a really powerful game-breaking type of ability. You very, very rarely get to set things up closer than 9 inches to the enemy. And when you do, it's usually not 3 inches away. It's like 7 inches or something like that. So 3 inches is a massive, massive difference and lets you do some really weird things. Now, you're still restricted from charging or making pile-ins. So you can't put them 3 inches away and then pile in with a 6-inch pile-in. You can't put them 3 away and then charge. And you can't shoot because, again, we don't have any shooting units. So it's not overpowered. But there are some specific things you can do with this that are very powerful. And I'll give you one example. This is probably the example. Your opponent might move a unit, let's say like 5 inches away. Or maybe they move 3 in and then you redeploy. So you're 5 inches away or something like that. You roll your 4 up and you get a replacement unit. You can summon a screen 3 inches away from their unit that's about to charge, between their unit and your unit. You can be 3 inches away from them and essentially summon a screen out of nowhere. I don't think any other army can do something like that. And it's a really powerful ability to have. And again, it's one that's on a random dice roll. I'm not sure it's appropriate for that ability to be on a random dice roll. I think it would make more sense if it was just something you built up and then expended. But it's not. It's random. And your opponent is going to kind of have to account for, well, there's a 50-50 chance that they can summon a unit, and they have a dead unit of zombies. So they're going to be able to summon 10 or 20 zombies in a line sort of in front of this unit, right? They're about to charge your Graveguard. You summon that block of skeletons between the charging unit and the Graveguard. That ruins their whole plan. If they go ahead with the charge, they get counter-charged next turn. They take a bunch of damage from the zombies. We'll see how zombies work in the future. But yeah, I think this 3-up thing is something people might miss on the initial... Sorry, not 3-up. 3-inch thing is something people might miss on the initial read-through. But it's actually a very, very important change. It also means it's basically impossible to zone out the grave sites. Right? You can summon units very, very close to enemies. So you've got a big 12-inch circle, and you only have to be 3 inches away. This means you can summon things in really inconvenient spots for your opponent. I did say there were 2 things in this paragraph, but there's actually 3. The third one is that you can summon units near a hero. So it doesn't have to be a gravesite. It can just be a hero. This is worth noting because the way you place your heroes might change because of it. You might put your gravesite sort of in a square and then put your heroes away from your gravesites so that you can summon those replacement units near the heroes. Also keep in mind, this happens at the end of the movement phase, so you can move your hero first in the movement phase and then summon units with him or near him. So something like Manfred that moves 16, you can move Manfred 16 or even run him up to like, is it 22? And then summon a unit within 12 of him. So if you need to get bodies on an objective, for example, Manfred can fly all the way over to a place where there's an objective that for some reason you haven't put a gravesite on. And then you can summon models 3 inches away on that objective. Right? Because you're not zoned out from the objective. You only have to be 3 inches away. You can just put models dead on top of an objective with this ability. That is absolutely massive. So there are some weird things that this will cause. And it is almost... you almost want dead units just to have this option up your sleeve, just to have all the sort of, I can just put bodies on this objective this turn, and I know you don't have enough to kill these bodies, right? I can summon 15 skeleton warriors or something on this objective because you haven't been able to zone the whole thing out, and you just can't kill them this turn, or you have to send your army backwards to start dealing with them. It's going to be really frustrating for your opponents to try and deal with this ability, given how much space on the board. You've got 4 big 12-inch circles and then a 12-inch circle around every hero, and those heroes can move first before they summon these units. I think this ability alone is going to change a lot about how the Soulblight Gravelords play. It's not changing in how many models we're bringing back, although I think the 4-up with +1 in your movement phase is better than before, so we will bring back more models. But we're still getting half-strength units is what I mean. I think the big thing that changes here is how close we can get to the enemy, and that we can sort of move heroes around and summon things straight out of those heroes. So this makes necromancy really powerful in the Soulblight Gravelords, and this is something that I complained about. If you see my earlier video about what was wrong with the 2.0 book, the big thing that was wrong with the 2.0 book is that necromancy and vampirism was really weak, right? You didn't feel like a powerful necromancer playing the army. You didn't have that theme carry through into the rules of the army, and this sort of change, I think makes the ability seem really powerful. I'm not sure if it's like the exact right change. Maybe not having half-strength units, but making this a bit weaker might have been the way to go. But having full strength units come back means you have to make the summonable units even weaker to sort of compensate. I think this is a good middle ground. This is a very tactical type of rule. Having these units up your sleeve, it really changes things when you get this roll, because obviously you can't guarantee you're going to get the roll. So you could move your hero and hope that you're going to get the 3 up to summon models onto an objective, but you can't know. And again, I think the fact that this is random undercuts the power level of the kinds of plays you could make. All right, if you knew you were going to get the roll because you'd saved up points and you were just going to spend them, then things like, well, my opponent gets within 3, I'm going to spend the point to redeploy and move back so I can create room to summon the screen that I know I'm going to get. But now, I don't know if I want to spend that redeploy command point because I don't even know that I'm going to get the unit back. Or I don't know that I want to move my hero to the enemy's sort of backline gravesite so that I can summon a replacement unit onto that gravesite because I don't know that that unit is going to come back this turn. So I think... again, I think the randomness here is really undercuts how fun the ability will be to use, because it's going to feel like you can't set up for it, you can't play around it, like you can't play with it expecting it to happen, even though it's on a 3-up. So a lot of the time, you're just going to sort of get the roll and be like, okay, where can I put these now? Instead of actively thinking about, I'm going to set up a play so that once it gets to the end of the movement phase, I've got a really good place to put these models. All the same, I think it's massively powerful and it's going to be really, really useful. Let's just finish this ability off. I think the last bit is the same, but it's just about heroes. So if you pick a summonable hero on a 4-up, you can set that hero up wholly within 12 of a friendly Gravelord's hero or gravesite, so you can still do both hero or gravesite, and more than 3 from all enemy units with 3 wounds allocated to it. That hero cannot attempt, charge, or pile in, and the same hero cannot benefit from this ability more than once per battle. Okay, that's fine. The flat 3 wounds is a bit unfortunate because the smaller, there's different summonable heroes. Heroes with fewer wounds come back with a higher percentage of damage to them than other heroes. I don't know why they didn't just make it with a number of wounds equal to half its wounds characteristic. Maybe it's like a formatting thing, doesn't quite fit here. But ends up, 3 is fine. I think it might only be the 2 White Kings anyway, and so it sort of means there's a 5 wound one and I think a 7 wound one. Ends up being pretty close to half in either case. We already covered Unquiet Dead. So on to... Oh, sorry. One more thing. It says you can't charge or make a pile-in move, but you can use abilities on the War Scroll, which we'll cover when we get to the White King, or I've got to check all the keywords to see if there are other summonable heroes, but I'm pretty sure it's just the White Kings. They have an ability that you can use. We'll see if... you can use that ability the turn you come out of a gravesite, because that is sort of a neat little tactical use of this ability. All right, yeah, we covered the Unquiet Dead. We'll move on to Deathly Invocation. This got a massive simplification. One of the things I complained about in the previous book was the enormous bloat in this rule in particular, but in other rules in the book. But this one had this big complicated matrix of, like, if you're a Mortarch, you can heal 4 units. If you're a Vampire, you can heal 3. If you're a Death Mage or a Death Rattle hero, you can heal 2 or whatever it is. That's all gone away with. Now you can just pick 3 units within 12 of a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero. It should be noted that based off the previous wording, this doesn't mean within 12 of the one hero, so you don't like pick a hero and 3 units within 12 of them. You can have a unit within 12 of a Vampire Lord on one side of the board, unit within 12 of a White King on the other side of the board, unit within 12 of Manfred in the middle of the board, and you can still pick those 3 units because they're all wholly within 12 of a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero. That still works. I'm honestly confused about why there's a limitation on it, why there's a maximum of 3. If you ever get 3, 3 damage units that are wholly within 12 of a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero in your hero phase, I mean, kudos to you if you're getting 4 units in that situation. That's very, very unlikely. Usually a unit is full health because the enemy hasn't damaged it yet, or it's destroyed because the enemy attacked it and it died. It's very rare to find them partially damaged, and especially in your hero phase, because often the way the game plays, like, I'll charge you with my Graveguard kill most of your unit kills a couple Graveguard, it's your turn, some other unit comes up, kills my Graveguard, or, you know, almost completely destroys them. Then maybe you double turn me and then kill the Graveguard unit. It's just the kind of game where it's very hard to find yourself in this situation where you have lots of damaged units. You can have them, but I mean, especially if you look at the units in the book, right? Zombies have no save, so you need like 60 of them to have a realistic chance, or maybe 40 of them to have a realistic chance that they won't just die in one attack. Graveguard are very expensive, so it's very unlikely. They have like a 5-up save as well. Very hard to expect them to survive an attack. Skeleton Warriors in a block of 30 will survive being hit once, but unfortunately that takes 2 reinforcement points, so it's unlikely. Like, you can't have 4 units of Skeleton Warriors that have 30 models each. That just doesn't fit in a list. So it's actually really, really hard to get 3 units that you heal in the same turn. So I don't know why they put a limit on it. They could have just said each unit that's wholly within 12 of a hero gets this healing. But whatever. They've put a limit on it because it had a limit before, and the reason they had a limit before is because it had a limit before that, and I think the reason it had a limit before that was because you could stack it. You could heal the same unit with multiple different heroes. Still didn't make sense, still didn't work properly. So this is like a legacy of a rule that didn't work right. That's why there's a limit of 3 here. Worth noting that you can pick a hero with this. So summonable heroes don't just come back with Endless Legions, they heal with Deathly Invocation as well, which is neat to know given that they have 3 wounds allocated to it. Normally when you get a replacement unit, like if you get 15 skeletons back after your 30-man died, that's the new unit size. So you can't return models to that 15-man unit of Skeleton Warriors and bring it back up to the 30, but you can heal wounds on the hero that got wounds allocated to it when it came back this way. You can also use Heroic Recovery to do that. So that's really interesting to know. Another little thing is that it says in your hero phase. This is a change, I'm pretty sure. Previously, Deathly Invocation used to say at the beginning of your hero phase, and I have a feeling that ruined a specific interaction with Damned Terrain, because I think Damned Terrain says in your hero phase. So now you'll be able to set your units up near Damned Terrain, use the Damned Terrain to deal D3 mortal wounds to your models, get +1 to hit, and then immediately heal back those D3 damage. That's it's a small play, but it feels really nice doing it because you just get free bonuses, especially since we lost some of our bonuses sort of to hit and wound in the book. So just that change from at the beginning of your hero phase to in your hero phase is also a really, really neat little bonus. There's probably a few other interactions that I'm not thinking of right now, but I think there's a way to move units in the hero phase as well. If you're Vyrkos, you can move zombies in the hero phase, so this might like bring them in range of Deathly Invocation, and then you can heal them with that. So there's some things to think about here, and just keep it in mind for when we read the rest of the book. All right, you can heal either heal up to 3 wounds allocated to that unit, or if no wounds have been allocated to that unit, you can return a number of slain models to it that have a combined wounds characteristic of 3 or less. I think this is the same verbiage as before, but we've just changed D3 to a flat 3. I support this change. I think it would have been nicer for it to be a flat 2, and you get it in your hero phase in there. Your battle shock phase and their battle shock phase, but we still only have it once per battle round, but now it's a flat 3. That's much nicer. The 3 means that you can reliably like return a Fellbat. I think if Fellbats still have 3 wounds, I'll have to double check that later. And you can heal like the 3 wounds that you summoned your White King with in the previous turn. He can heal those 3 wounds back straight away. So 3 is really handy. There's still a clumsy clumsy thing in this where if you've got a unit of Black Knights or Direwolves that have 2 wounds and they've taken a wound, you can't heal the wound and return the model. This is a really big pain point that just like for no reason at all, sometimes your ability will heal more wounds and sometimes it'll heal less, just based on how many wounds are currently on the model. I don't know why, like, for example, this combined wounds characteristic is a really complicated concept and it just sort of works. I don't know why they couldn't create a verbiage that says you can heal and return a number of slain models that have a combined wound characteristic of 3 or less, in a way that like makes it clear you could spend 1 of those on healing and then 2 on bringing back a model or something like that. Seems like we have the technology. Seems like it's not that hard to do. You could easily use like an FAQ or a clarification bit of text, that sort of italic stuff that explains, well, this is how we're intending this, the designer's note type of thing. Because you know, even if this big block of text explains exactly how that works, the concept of it is really simple, right? Like we all know how it would go if you've got one wound allocated and then a 2 wound model that you want to bring back. We know that that's like how it should work. And we're just trying to create rules that work the way everyone thinks it should work. But for some reason, it doesn't do that. All right. Add 1 to the number of slain models that are returned to that unit if it is wholly within 12 of a gravesite. You cannot pick the same unit to benefit from this ability more than once. All right, so add 1 to the amount of models returned. That's an interesting thing because it doesn't care about the combined wounds characteristic anymore. You can have a Fellbat that has 3 wounds. So you can return like 2 full Fellbats if you don't have any wounded Fellbats, if you're within 12 of a gravesite. That's pretty cool. It really helps with those multi-wound models, just adding 1 to the number of slain models. It has a really weird operation and actually exacerbates the problem that I just talked about. So if I have 1 wounded Black Knight and I'm within 12 of a gravesite, maybe this just needs an FAQ question, but I can heal up to 3 wounds, or if no wounds have been allocated, I can return slain models. Well, there's a wound allocated, so I can't return any slain models. I just have to heal the 1 wound to that Black Knight. And then it says, add 1 to the number of slain models that are returned. Well, I didn't return any. Does that mean I return 1 now? Or does that mean I didn't return any, so I don't add anything? The number was never there, so it doesn't go from 0 to 1. It just doesn't work. I think we need an FAQ to explain that. I hope they rule it in the way where you can heal a wound and then bring a Black Knight back. But I really doubt they'll do that. I think they'll do it the wrong way. And I say the wrong way. The way it's written, it seems to imply to me that you can't return any models unless you returned some with the above ability. So if you just healed wounds, then you don't return models. But that does mean that you go from, like, with your Black Knight unit, if it has no wounds allocated to it, you bring back 4 wounds worth of models. You bring back 2 models. Compared to if it has 1 wound allocated, you bring back 1 wound worth of models. So the, like, rolling a D3 aspect is gone to the randomness, but the random range depends on how many wounds you've taken on the unit. And it's just like whether it lands on a 1 or a 0 kind of randomness. It's still a coin flip or like a 1 in 3 chance, depending on if it's got more wounds. To whether you get 1 wound back or up to 6 wounds back. So even though this says 3, it really depends on the type of unit that you're using and where they've been left. I don't think this is like an interesting gameplay like mechanic. I don't think people are thinking, oh, I've left that Black Knight unit so that has a wound on it so that I can stop it summoning more models back. I don't think anyone thinks like that. But you as the Soulblight player are like, oh, damn, because you left that Black Knight with 1 wound on it, I now can't bring back more of them. I think it's really just like the rules bringing the game down, that they've worked it like this, and it's worked like this since Legends of Nagash as well. This combined wounds characteristic thing, they just for some reason are resistant to the idea of saying you can heal and then return a number of models. I don't know why they couldn't just say like you heal 2 wounds and then return a number of models, because then it's not going to heal a summonable hero. It's just going to heal them 2 wounds. That's not overpowered. I mean, you can heal them 3, right? You can just heal them 3 and then return a model. Is it that overpowered to have 1 or maybe 2 extra wounds coming back by just healing the unit and making it always feel good for the Soulblight player? It just feels really horrible having like a one wound allocated to your direwolf and saying, oh, well, I can get rid of that wound, right? Masters of Necromancy over here, I can get rid of 1 wound once per battle round, right? It's not happening at the battle shock phase, it's happening in the battle round. That sucks. Works beautifully for zombies and skeletons that are 1 wound models. You just get 4 of them back if they're near a gravesite, or 3 of them back if they're not. That's really good. Feels good getting two direwolves or 2 black knights or even 2 fellbats in the situations where you get those, but there's going to be a lot of the time, 50% of the time, I suppose, where you don't get the direwolf or the black knight, and 2/3 of the time where you don't get the extra fellbats. So I guess that's Deathly Invocation. You still can't pick the same unit to heal more than once. We'll see in the spell lore we lost the other thing that heals, the spell that heals. So before you could heal 3 with the spell and then D3 with Deathly Invocation. Now it's just 3 with Deathly Invocation and then maybe 1 extra with the if you're near a gravesite. This still gives you a reason to pay attention to gravesites and where your dudes are, but it's not an overwhelming sort of, you don't have to stay there. And the reason why I think we get this little bit of incentive to stay near gravesites is because if we look at the new Deathless minions, we don't have to worry about where we stand anymore. You don't have to be near a gravesite, you don't have to be near a hero, your dudes just get a 6-up ward. I think this is a good change. It's less accounting. This is too small a buff to pay attention to being in circles for. You have other buffs that you want to be near heroes for anyway, but I think the big one is Blood Knights. In the past, I want to keep my zombies or my skeletons near my Vampire Lord. They want to be holy in 12 of him for the Vampire Lord buff, so I would get Deathless minions on them all the time. Blood Knights often want to run off and do their own thing. They have a unit champion to give themselves commands. They don't need the Vampire Lord command. They don't get the Necromancer Van Hell's Dance. So they're a good little self-contained unit that can do their own thing. But when they run off and do their own thing, they lose their 6-up ward. And on a unit with a 3-up save, a 6-up ward is much better than on a unit with almost no armor save. The reason for that is every time the ward saves a wound, the next time that wound is taken, you get to roll the armor save again. So armor saves and wards sort of stack with each other and get exponentially better the better both of them are. Actually felt bad losing the 6-up ward on those Blood Knights, and now you don't have to worry about it. You just get it all the time. I think it's good for everyone. You just know that you have a 6-up ward across the board. I'm not sure it's necessary for the army to even have this, but just not having any shooting stuff, we also happen to have a 6-up ward all the time. That's just sort of how they do death books. So that's it for the Soulblight Gravelords allegiance abilities. I spent a lot more on that than I thought, but I really think it looks like small changes, and we have small changes in Unquiet Dead, but in Endless Legions in particular, there's a big change, and I think I haven't talked about what's missing. I think it's worth dropping the reanimated horrors, and Locus of Shyish is kind of still here, even though it's not listed in this section. So it's worth what we lost. Reanimated Horrors was bad and had this similar problem of accounting with not much benefit. And now we don't have the accounting, and we don't have to worry about accounting for if you're within 6 of the skeleton or within 6 of 2 skeletons, and whether or not your opponent's playing death. That doesn't even work against death. But Reanimated Horrors was a bad rule. It was always a bad rule. And if you play against Soulblight Gravelords, you probably didn't even realize we had it, because the person playing Soulblight probably forgot we had it. I think the changes here, on the whole, make this ability much more powerful, particularly being able to put units directly onto an objective making your opponent have to zone you out 3 inches away instead of 9 inches away is absolutely massive. They're going to have to really pay attention to those, backfield objectives to make sure you're not summoning like 15 skeleton warriors straight onto their objective that has like 10 dudes on it. They're going to have to worry about you scoring a whole bunch of free points by just constantly showing up and counting as models on objectives, or creating screens out of nowhere between their movement phase and their charge phase and all that sort of stuff. So I think, really big change, even though it's got sort of the nerf of end of the movement phase. End of the battleship phase was obviously better for us in some ways. I think still a really, really positive change for Endless Legions. We're going to get more models back, and they're going to contest objectives and cause all sorts of havoc. So big bonuses. In general, I like this. I like this set of rules. It's a bit more streamlined. I think we're doing well so far. I think compared to the previous book, compared to Legions of Nagash in particular, this is a massive, massive improvement. All right, talking over myself, getting excited. I think we can just move this way. Yeah, we're going to go Avengorii first. I think this is because it's alphabetical. I'm not sure this is the order that it's in the book, but we're going to start with probably the least interesting one first. Avengorii. Battle traits, Cursed Abominations. So we only have the one bonus per subfaction. This is a change from before. We used to have, I think, 2 bonuses each. Now we have 1, and it's a better bonus. Once per turn, at the start of the combat phase, you can pick 1 friendly Avengorii monster within 3 of any enemy units. To the end of that phase, use the top row of that unit's damage table, regardless of how many wounds it has suffered. This type of ability almost always is bad. There's 2 parts to it. Firstly, it happens in the combat phase. If it happened at the hero phase and then could use its top row for the entire turn, it would mean that it could use the top movement characteristic, which is really important for just Age of Sigmar in general. It's a movement-based game, but you can't use that movement characteristic. You can only use the combat one. If you look at the charts, generally the combat doesn't degrade that much, but there's another sort of issue with this. If your monster degrades really, really quickly, then it's a bad monster, and you don't want to play with it, right? So this ability might be really powerful if your monster degrades quickly, but your monster itself is going to be really weak, and you're just not going to want to use it. Conversely, if your monster doesn't degrade very quickly, then this ability does almost nothing, because your monster is probably either doing a lot of damage anyway or is totally dead. So the ability rarely comes up, rarely does something useful, but you are playing those monsters. So sort of in either case, if you have this ability, you're not making a lot of use out of it. And especially because you can't use it for the movement, you can't retreat a low health monster at its full movement value onto an objective where it will count as 5 wounds. I find this kind of thing to be really unappealing. It doesn't pull me into playing Avengorii at all. However, we have some more abilities. Each of the subfactions gets either monstrous rampages or heroic actions. Some of them have 2 heroic actions, some have 1 heroic action and 1 monstrous rampage. Avengorii, of course, have 2 monstrous rampages because they focus on monsters, and these are quite good. So, at the end of the charge phase, you can carry out 1 of the monstrous rampages below with a friendly Avengorii monster instead of any other monstrous rampages. So, worth noting, you can't carry out 2 of them. Oh no, sorry, I'm misreading that. I think that means that if you have 2 monsters, you can carry out 2. Yeah, it just means that you give up 1 for another one. Sorry, yeah, jumping the gun. So it works like normal. You can just use this instead of 1 of the monstrous rampages. You can have, if you've got 2 monsters, you can use Maddening Hunger on one of them and Unstoppable Nightmare on the other. That should work fine based on that. All right, we're all good. Okay, Maddening Hunger. This one was teased in the Warhammer Community article. Pick up to 3 different enemy models within 1 of this unit and roll the dice. Roll separately for each model. If the roll is greater than that model's wound characteristic, it is slain. This is a neat ability. When charge, you get to sort of pick where you end up. So the fact that it's within one, it's a bit restrictive. It means like if you're against 32mm models, you kind of can't pick something behind the front rank. Other abilities, like I think the Stardrake Cavernous Jaws is like a 3-inch range, so you got a pretty wide selection on the models that you can pick. This one's only 1 inch, which I think is unfortunate. But, you know, you are charging with a flying monster first, so often you'll get to pick where you end up when you get to use this ability. I suppose you could be using it on the enemy's turn after they've charged you, in which case you're not really picking which models are close to it. They could put all their important guys in the back rank to stop you picking out horn blowers and banner bearers and things like that. Your opponent will probably forget to do that, but I like to assume that your opponent is playing optimal when I'm evaluating rules, and they can hide important models pretty easily from a 1-inch reach. But if we ignore that and just look at the raw damage, like if we ignore the fact that you can pick models, which ones you're destroying, just look at the raw damage. It picks D3 models, so often it'll only be 1, or maybe 2. It's hard to break up coherency with 1 or 2. Especially since you could just fail the roll. If you're rolling against 1 wound models, this is the same damage as a stomp, right? You've got D3 chances on a 2-up. Stomp is the same sort of thing. It's on a 2-up, and then you get D3. The math works out the same. On average, against 1 wound models, this will do the same amount of damage, but it actually goes up if you do higher wound models. So like a 3 wound model, you'll average 2 on the D3 roll, and then you'll have a 4-up to kill them. So you'll kill one of them and not the other on average, which means the average against 3 wound models of using Maddening Hunger is 3 wounds, which is better than Stomp's average of 2 wounds. This is a long, convoluted way of saying that this ability is like a slight, very slight upgrade to Stomp. It lets you pick the models. Unfortunately, it's 3 different enemy models. If this ability just said pick up to D3 enemy models, you could pick the same model 3 times and have 3 goes at killing it. So you could have like, oh, I really want to kill this hero, and maybe if I roll a 6, he just dies in the charge phase. But no, you're doing this to 3 different separate models. This also makes it harder to break up coherency, because you can't, if there's one key model you need to kill, you could just roll badly on it. Whereas if you pick them multiple times, that would work. Also, generally, as this is happening in the charge phase, this happens before your enemy piles in, so they'll be able to fix the coherency with their pile in. So it's sort of this close to being really powerful, but I think it misses out on it by like a few of the nuances of the way this ability works. I would just think of this as like a slightly better Stomp, I guess. Yeah, it does cause things to be slain, so there's a few interactions that it misses. Like, I don't know, if you're fighting against Chaos, they don't get their rune shield saves. You could just like charge into a unit of Chaos Warriors and spike 6 wounds worth of killing models. But other armies have similar abilities like this as mount traits, which you'll notice we don't have. Even in Avengorii, we used to have mount traits, and they got rid of them. They even added another mount trait in the Tome Celestial, which was a really good mount trait that you just take on your first Vlozzard all the time, and they just got rid of it. So other armies have, like, when you stomp, you do 3 plus a D3 instead. So this is not very good. I'm spending too much time on an ability that is not very good. The other one, Unstoppable Nightmare, this is much better. A little bit confusing the way it's worded, but a much better ability. Until the end of the following combat phase, the first time a different friendly Avengorii unit within 6 inches of this unit is destroyed, this unit can fight immediately after the last slain model is destroyed. In the destroyed unit is removed from play. So when it says this unit, it means the unit using the monstrous action. So your monster will charge into an enemy unit. You'll charge with another Avengorii unit. When that other unit dies, the monster can fight immediately. So potentially, you can fight with the monster. You activate this in the charge phase. Then you fight with your monster. Then a nearby Avengorii unit dies. And then you fight with your monster again. That's what the point of this is, in my view. I don't know exactly what happens if you do it in the other way around. So, for example, if it's your opponent's turn, you activate Unstoppable Nightmare. They kill a unit within 6. Then you fight because of Unstoppable Nightmare. But I don't think you get to pick to fight again later in the phase because you've already fought, so you're not eligible to fight again. And I think that might be the Achilles heel. This might need an FAQ for that. Like, that's why I think this ability is a bit confusing. But yeah, when I look at it, it looks like you can fight twice with a monster. And there's no restriction on like monster that's not a hero. So you could just get your Vlozid or Vengorian Lord, and it could potentially fight twice. And this requirement that they destroy another unit in Soulblight is not difficult, right? That's something that you can safely sort of bank on, especially if you're setting it up. I think in your opponent's turn, they will just kill the monster first, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon is really durable, but yeah, if it ends up that you can't fight twice, and I just think it needs an FAQ, because my understanding is rules is written you can't fight twice if this ability procs before you use the ability to fight. So there's a high potential this is not very useful because of that. But I still think, being able to fight twice with that Vampire Lord's profile, that's still a very good ability. And the way that this is sort of worded, it's not impossible to make it trigger. So, I think we're doing all right. Maddening Hunger is not bad. It's just not good. It's a bit like having a command ability for +1 to wound, where you're like, maybe this is sometimes better than all out attack, but it's like basically the same thing. This is basically a stomp, the way it's worded. So yeah, I think you can usually disregard this. This thing I think is pretty bad, and you can disregard that. But Unstoppable Nightmare, I think Unstoppable Nightmare is quite good. So 1 out of 3, I guess, for Avengorii so far. But we do have command traits and artifacts to look at still. All right. Command traits. Twisted Paragons, Avengorii General only. Monstrous Might. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons that target friendly Avengorii monsters wholly within 12 of this general. This is not a horrible ability. It means, you get -1 to wound on the general itself if the general's a monster, which in Avengorii it probably is going to be a monster. Even that alone, if it was just you get -1 to wound rolls against the general, that's not a horrible command ability. And that's the way I look at it. It's -1 to wound against the general itself, and then all the other monsters that are within 12 of it, which, you might have other monsters in an Avengorii list, especially with the way, if you look at like the way the Vengorian Lord works, you'll sort of run them in pairs. So I think this is a decent ability. Unfortunately, it only works against melee weapons. I don't know why it has to only work against melee weapons, but that happens to be the case. And I think there's another command trait in the book, or it might be an artifact, that is a similar or better version of this. But nonetheless, I think this is a fine ability. If you're playing Avengorii, you might actually take this command trait. If I remember right, the previous command traits for Avengorii were pretty bad, so this is definitely an upgrade. I think it's better than what they had before already. But yeah, not too much more to say about it. Okay, Torment-driven throws. At the beginning of the combat phase, you can roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of this general. On a 5-up, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound, and the Strike Last effect applies to that unit at the end of that phase. I think we had this. I'm not sure if it was a mount trait or if it was a general thing, but I think we had this ability before in the Soulblight Gravelords book, and it was bad before. This might be slightly improved somehow. Maybe it's each enemy. But the big problem with this ability is that it's on a 5-up, right? Strike Last is good, but you have no way to depend on getting Strike Last. So the fact that it's on a 5-up really, really weakens this ability. Really sort of means sometimes you'll get it and you couldn't plan around it. I've got to explain more why it's bad that you can't plan around it. When you're in your movement and charge phase, you are thinking about how many activations you're going to have and what order. I can maybe I want to charge sort of 2 units in this turn because I can charge my hammer into their hammer and my maybe my tar pit into their tar pit, and I'll activate my hammer first. I'll destroy their unit. They'll activate their anvil type thing and do almost no damage to my anvil. So I can activate my anvil, do almost no damage back to them, but they're locked in place where I wanted them to be locked in. So it's all good, it works out. But I don't want to charge 3 units, because if I charge another hammer into their hammer, well, I'll activate my hammer, they'll activate their hammer and destroy mine, and I'm sort of just giving them free damage. Okay? If you can use an ability that lets you fight first or makes them fight last, and you can depend on that ability, then you can use that information all the way back in your movement phase to decide how many combats you want to set up. This ability stops you using that information because you might charge in a couple of fights, and then this doesn't activate and it screws up all of your activations. It means your opponent gets a bunch of free damage on you. So it's basically not usable. It has a similar effect in reverse for your opponent. Your opponent might think, well, if I charge that guy, there's a chance I fight last. So, maybe I don't charge him. It's possible. And on a 5-up, I think is that sort of, he's not going to expect that to happen. It's less likely to happen than not happen. So it does have the opposite mind game for your opponent, can make it harder for him to use the information about his activations in his movement phase and his charge phase. But I find like the odds are against you because it's on a 5-up, and it's not just against you, but like your opponent knows the probability and is going to make, again, we're assuming he's making rational decisions about his gameplay. He's just going to pick activations knowing that happens. So it's always going to be like the worst version of it for you. Your opponent's going to play around this ability, but you can't play into it. You can't take advantage of it, but your opponent can mitigate it. So in general, abilities like this are very bad. Despite the fact that applying a strikes last effect is a really powerful effect, the randomness of it just means you can't really use it properly. So I wouldn't be taking this. It doesn't look like a good command ability to me. I think they shouldn't have printed this. They should have changed it. They could have just made it a strike last thing, like Helm of Many Eyes, I think. I know Demon Princes are bad, but Slaves to Darkness have an artifact for them that makes them always strike first. That's a really good command trait or artifact sort of ability if it's always strikes first, just on the thing. But maybe some of them should be good. I don't know. You're not going to take this, is my guess. You're probably just going to take -1 to wound. This way, your opponent might go before you because you haven't applied the strike last, but at least when they go before you, they're going to have -1 to wound. Whereas this one, they'll go before you and they won't have any penalty against them because you'll roll a 1, 2, 3, or a 4, and this will do literally nothing. So there we go. Oh, one last thing. The Vengorian Lord does want to be within 3 of multiple enemy units to reduce their rend, so this does have sort of a synergy with that, where like if you can try and get this within 2 or 3 units, you've got a higher chance of making one of them fight last. But I still think it's too random, and it's not like a cockatrice. You can't stack this up. You just sort of you're not really taking advantage of it. All right. Unhinged Rampager. You can re-roll charge rolls for this general. In addition, at the end of the shooting phase, if any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated to this general in that phase, and this general is more than 9 from all enemy units, this general can move up to d6. Okay. So you re-roll charge rolls, and you get to move when you get shot. But specifically shot, not magic, and I guess not charge phase, although generally if you're taking damage in the charge phase, it's because somebody charged you, so you'd be within 3. Yeah, it's not good. You can reroll charge rolls with a command point anyway, and you only get to move once as well. So it's at the end of the shooting phase. So it's not like if they shoot you with one thing, you move, and they shoot you with another thing, you move again. And when you move, you only move d6. So like you just move once. I guess you could redeploy when they move near you, and then when they shoot you, you can move again. And there are like limited circumstances where that's a good thing. But also, like this, your opponent can just not shoot you. If giving you d6 inches of movement ruins their game plan, they just won't shoot you. But if they need to shoot you, if shooting you is worth more than the d6 movement, then they're just going to shoot you anyway. Like, they're always going to make the optimal decision. So this kind of ability, I would almost disregard all this shit. You can reroll charges for this general. That's not very good. I think that might even be, I feel like it's a generic command trait that does something like that. This is bad. This is not very good. This is bad. Monstrous Might, actually half decent. I think most of the time you're playing Avengorii, you're going to take Monstrous Might or Master of Magic. I can't see people taking any of the other things very often. Maybe if they, like, these might be more fun, but this is definitely better. All right. Artifacts of Power. Okay. I read ahead. In the previous book, all the Avengorii artifacts were horrible. They're all once per game, and they had chances to not do anything. And even when they did work, they didn't do a ton of damage. They didn't do a ton. So, let's see what's changed. Oh no, once per battle. Once per battle. It's not looking good. At the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy unit within 6 of the bearer that is visible to them and roll a dice. On a 2-up, that unit suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the roll. This is very bad. It does d6 mortal wounds. And, slightly, on average, slightly less, because on the one, it doesn't even do 1 mortal wound. Could have just done d6? It could have. Why does it have to be once per battle? Couldn't have been something that you trigger multiple times? It's bad. I don't think anyone's going to take that. Of course you want to feel like, yeah, I'm going to roll the 6 and 1 hit their 5 wound hero or whatever it is. You're going to roll a 1. It's not going to do anything. You roll a 2. It's not going to do anything meaningful. You roll a 3. It's still not going to do anything meaningful. Like, you have to roll a 5 or a 6 for this to matter. Don't take it. You'll feel bad. Sad. I'm sad for Avengorii. I don't like this faction. But like, that's phoning it in. These are bad. This is bad. This is good, but it's like, it's not super interesting. I don't know. Let's see. Maybe the other two are good. Once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can say that the bearer will don Gorvar's collar. If you do so, the strike first effect applies to the bearer until the end of that phase. Okay, well, at least, compared to this, at least this is a guarantee. At least this one, you 100% know that you are going to get this. That makes it a bit better. I would take Gorvar's collar over Breath of the Void more, because then you can, at least one turn, you can have sort of 2 units fight before the enemy fights, which could be handy. All right. I don't think this necessarily has to be once per battle, but it is a powerful effect. With the nerfs to sort of Arcane Tome, I can see this being the option. All right, you're definitely not taking this. I still don't think this reaches the bar. I think like once per battle for strike first. I don't think it's doing enough for me. But like, you've vaulted fighting first against something that charged it. It could do a fair bit of damage. Yeah, it's not horrible. I don't love it, but it's not horrible. Yeah, no, I think that's it. It's not super interesting either, but okay. Let's strikes first. The Furious Crown. Once per battle, at the start of your charge phase, you can say that the bearer will unleash the Fury of the Crown. If you do so after the bearer makes a charge move in that phase, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of the bearer and roll a number of dice equal to that charge move for that charge move. For each 4+, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. Okay, so you get an ogre charge once per battle. Why once per battle? Is this that powerful an effect? If this is that powerful an effect that you can't give it to them every turn, why do ogres get it? I mean, I guess because it's an ogre charge, but it's not that powerful when ogres get it every turn. Like, you can't charge every turn unless you charge and kill the thing you're charging into and your opponent doesn't charge it back. This is not that powerful an ability. I feel like they could have just given this to you every turn and it would have been fun. You would have felt, yeah, my big monster crashes in, does a bunch of mortals on the charge. But now you feel like, well, I can only use this once, and you have to use it at the start of the charge phase, so you don't even get to see your charge roll. You can't be like, oh, I rolled a fucking 12, I'm going to activate my Furious Crown and do a ton of damage. You're going to activate this and then roll a 3 and be like, I guess. I suppose at worst you can pair it with Unhinged Rampager so that you can re-roll the charge roll, but you can do that anyway with a command point. It's okay. I just, like, it's a generic ability and it's once per battle. I'm not really happy with any of these. I think you take one of these, but the Furious Crown is like the same as Breath of the Void more. If you compare, like, I do D6 wounds at the start of the combat phase to I do, like, this on average does 3, right? You roll a 7 on your charge and then you roll 3.5 4-ups. So it does 3.5 damage. This on average does like 2 point something, because if you roll the 1 it does nothing. So it, like, they're very similar amounts of very low damage. This you get to pick an enemy unit within 6. This you have to hit the thing that you charge into, so you get like a little bit extra damage, and potentially you can spike it if you've got like a reroll. The average goes up a little bit. This you can't affect. I think these are both really bad. This is okay. I think if you take Gorvar's Collar and you stack it with Monstrous Might or Torment Driven Throws, your opponent... Wait on, can you combo this with this at the start of the combat phase, once per battle at the start of the combat phase? Okay, so if you do take both of these, you can sort of combo them. So you roll this one, and if you don't roll your 5-up, then you don Gorvar's Collar. But if you do roll your 5-up, sweet, they're striking last, you're basically striking first because of that, then that's just as good. You don't activate Gorvar's Collar. So this works as a bit of a combo, because this way you get another go. Like, this is like once per battle, but if this thing triggers, then you can use it again. It's unlikely that's going to trigger on the first go, but it at least means that, like I was saying about using that information in your movement phase, you can plan around your monster fighting before them, because you've got the collar as a backup if your torment-driven throws doesn't work. And then if this thing goes off later in the battle, you're getting like a little bonus. But there is sort of a synergy here. Because you get the reroll charges on this. This thing, no synergy. But this is bad. Don't take Breath of the Void more. I think Gorvar's Collar makes it harder for your opponent to engage with that creature. Like, having a Vlozzard with Gorvar's Collar just makes it a dangerous proposition for your opponent to charge that thing. I think this artifact is okay. These two suck. This is good. This is bad, but you might take it. I think this is very bad and you won't take it. Being shot, moving D6 is not very useful, and you have to be more than 9 away from enemy units for Unhinged Rampager to work. Why couldn't you just be more than 3 away? Why do you have to be more than 9 away? That's crazy. This could be so much more powerful and still be balanced. You could just move in the enemy's movement phase. just move it D6 if you're more than 9 away. Like that would still be not worth taking. It's just like a free redeploy. This is bad. This is horrible. Avengorii, I feel bad for you. These rules together, when I look at this and this, not super impressed. One thing I should note, you know how I had this problem with Unstoppable Nightmare, where in your opponent's turn, if they kill the thing within 6, then you can't fight again. Gorvar's Collar does fix that, where they charge your monster and the unit next to it. You don Gorvar's Collar, your monster fights first, then they activate. They might damage your monster, but you've probably used Cursed Abomination, so you're fighting on top of the table. They activate the other unit to kill your... Oh, no, they have to do that first because you've got another unit in combat. So, like, let's say you got, like, Vargeists with your monster. You activate Unstoppable Nightmare and you put Cursed Abomination on it, just because you're using it on something. And you don Gorvar's Collar. I guess if you've got Torment-driven throws, you try to get the 5 up first, and then you don Gorvar's Collar if that doesn't work. You fight first, then your opponent activates the unit to kill the Vargeists standing nearby. Vargeists die. Your monster gets to fight again because Unstoppable Nightmare triggers. I think that's the one thing that this book is doing. I think you can stack these things: Torment-driven throws, Gorvar's Collar, and again, you don't need Torment-driven throws. This is just like, it does kind of works better if you've got a backup guarantee. But you could just take Monstrous Might and it would work fine. And then use Unstoppable Nightmare. And again, you don't need Cursed Abominations, but like, if you've taken damage, it'll improve the output. So I think that's not horrible. And you can set this up because this isn't an enhancement. You can do this with other monsters as well. Like in your turn, you don't have to be using Gorvar's Collar and stuff. You can just pick the monster to fight first and then throw in a unit of Fellbats or something that'll die and have the monster fight twice. I think with good play, you could squeeze a bit extra out of the Avengorii Dynasty. I'm not that interested. That might be because I'm not that interested in the monster version, but like, yeah, I kind of get it. I kind of get what they're doing. F for Voidmaw and Unhinged Rampager and Furious Crown, make better stuff next time. I think these two are going to be what you take most of the time. All right. Next up faction. Kastelai Dynasty. Is this really Legion? Oh, okay. All right, Kastelai Dynasty. Might of the Crimson Keep. At the end of the combat phase, if any enemy models were slain by attacks made with melee weapons by a friendly Kastelai vampire unit in that phase, you can pick one relevant ability opposite to apply to that friendly unit for the rest of the battle. If more than one of the abilities opposite would apply to that unit, you must pick which ability that unit gains. Okay, the unit can't gain the same ability more than once per battle. Okay, before these were just mutually exclusive, so I don't think you could have more than one of these apply. But I guess maybe you can. Oh, right, because model can have... No, wait. All right, let's just check. If the slain model was a hero or monster, if the slain model has a wounds characteristic of 3 or more and was not a hero or monster, so they're mutually exclusive because that's hero monster, that's not a hero monster. If the slain model had a wounds characteristic of 2 or less. Okay, so you could have a hero or monster that has a wounds characteristic of 2 or less. I think is the only way they could overlap. Am I crazy about that? Because you can't have 2 or less and 3 or more. That's mutually exclusive. And you can't be a hero monster and not a hero monster. So those are mutually exclusive. Those are mutually exclusive. This is not mutually exclusive with this. You could technically have something that is a monster and that has a wounds characteristic of 2 or less. I guess... Did that realm spell used to make? Yeah, it's going to be a really weird edge case that causes this to happen. So, okay, mostly it's determined for you. If you kill a hero or monster, you add 1 to the damage characteristic of that unit's melee weapons, excluding those of its mounts. Very good. This is what it was before. If the slain model had a wounds characteristic of 3 or more and was not a hero or monster, so just tough models that aren't heroes and monsters, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of that unit's melee weapon. I think this is replacing add 1 to the wounds characteristic. I like this much better. Add 1 to the attacks is nicer because things like a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon likes +1 attack a lot more than +1 wound. Blood Knights, it's maybe a wash. +1 wound is quite good on Blood Knights, but +1 attack is good too. And this applies to other vampires too, like Vargheists get this bonus as well. This ability, +1 to the move speed, is, I would say, nothing. This is like, don't bother with it. So add 1 to the damage if it's a hero monster, add 1 to the attacks if it's a powerful, or I guess a high wounds model. The biggest change I think here is not that it's gone from wounds to attacks and run and charge to movement. The biggest change is that it's gone from unit to model. Now you don't have to kill an entire unit. This was always a big problem with the previous Soulblight book. You used to have, for Endless Legions, you had to kill units to get bonuses to that roll. For Manfred, I think you had to... Oh, he might be model. But for this, you certainly had to kill a unit to get the bonus. And if you're killing whole enemy units, they're either very weak units, and they're going to fall into like this category, or they're very strong units, and this is a win more ability, because you're destroying your opponent's strongest units. Now, you get better when you fight, right? You don't have to kill... Like, I played a game recently against Slaves to Darkness. They had the big block of 10 Chaos Knights with the Eroding Icon and Mark of Nurgle. That unit is very durable. I'm not going to be able to kill the whole unit very easily. It's got like 30 wounds, -1 to be wounded, -1 to enemy rend. So killing that unit should net me a massive buff, right? But in the previous book, it's the same as this, right? I guess it was, you get +1 to your wound. Okay, so I deal 30 wounds worth of damage to a 3-up save with -1 to be wounded and -1 rend, and I get +1 to my wounds characteristic. Whereas now, you deal 3 wounds to that same unit and you get +1 attacks. Like, that's very, very different in terms of the level of accessibility. One thing that's worth noting is that you have to slay it with attacks. I always find this unfortunate in a vampire book, because vampires are magical creatures. They do damage with their spells. And there's a really egregious example of this when we get to the War Scrolls section. But also, like, Blood Knights they still have a Riders of Ruin ability, so they can deal damage by trampling over enemies. They don't get these bonuses from that. I guess there's a bit of flavor in it, like when they're fighting actual combat with their attacks, they're right up close and personal to the enemy, so they could stab them and then drink their blood while they're fighting. I don't know how that's convenient, but I guess that's the sort of lore here. They're getting empowered by the actual bloodshed, and if you're trampling over enemies or throwing spells at them from a distance, you're not necessarily sort of getting that blood bonus. So I guess it sort of makes flavor sense. At least it does here. Again, later in the book, there's a really egregious, horrible example of it. But just keep in mind, you have to slay them with attacks made with melee weapons by the Kastelai vampire units. Yeah, hero monster for +1 damage is obviously the best one. That's a bit hard to get. This, you'll find units in your opponent's army almost always that have this. This is very sad. I wish this was sort of better than it is, but it's, your opponent's screens are generally going to be models with a wounds characteristic of 2 or less. I think they're trying to say, like, weak units give you weak bonuses, strong units give you stronger bonuses, and I think that's a fair sort of list for that. And there are some ways to, like, manipulate how this works later on. So I think this is much better. I really like this compared to before, where it was like, it really was a win more before, but now you'll just accumulate these bonuses by making wise decisions about who you fight. So yeah, I like this as a big improvement. We did lose the shifting keep, putting your Blood Knights in reserve, but that actually shows up in a different part of the book. So we'll have a look at that when we get to the next page, I think. All right, their heroic action, they get 1 heroic action and 1 monstrous rampage in Kastelai. So Masters of Retaliation. At the start of the hero phase, you can use this as a heroic action instead of your other ones. Masters of Retaliation. Pick 1 friendly Kastelai vampire hero until the end of that turn. At the end of each phase, if any wounds or mortal wounds were allocated to this hero in that phase and that hero was not slain, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 of that hero. On a 2-up, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Okay, so this is a bad ability, but it's got some good upsides. It's generally bad though. So firstly, it suffers from that big problem of your opponent is in control of what this is doing. If you activate Masters of Retaliation, then your opponent can not shoot a spell at you in the hero phase. They can not shoot at you in the shooting phase. They cannot attack you in the combat phase. So it's automatically limited by the fact that this is always going to be applying the worst choice. All right. If they want to shoot the spell at you, it's because they think it's worth taking D3 mortal wounds on whatever's standing next to this guy compared to doing the damage to you. If they want to shoot at you, it's because they think shooting is going to be better than the D3 mortal wounds that you flick back at them. So your opponent is fully in control and making these decisions after you've activated this ability. It conflicts with Finest Hour. So if your opponent's like, oh, this one's mining this ability, or whatever, there's a battle tactic that they want to kill your hero, normally you respond to that with Finest Hour because you get +1 to your save. So this sort of conflicts with that. You're going to have to think, well, if I'm using this, I'm not using Finest Hour. Do I want to keep this guy alive by increasing his armor save? Or do I want to do more damage by retaliating? So that's another downside. The last thing is it's not a ton of damage. It's D3 mortal wounds. So there's a good chance your opponent can just absorb this damage, even if they absolutely have to kill the monster. You've done something to really force them to attack the hero. There's a good chance that they can just withstand these mortal wounds and it doesn't do a lot of damage. You have to be within 3. So, I mean, it makes sense you have to be within 3, but if they just retreat, they can avoid taking the damage. They can, obviously they can use spells and shoot you before they charge you, like before they get in combat. So you kind of have to be in combat for this to work. Finest Hour, you can use it and it'll work in the shooting phase and it'll work when they charge you later on. So also, this is losing out to Finest Hour in a number of ways. It's just not good. Yeah, the only advantage is like you may have already used Finest Hour and you've got this as a backup. It does happen to hit each enemy unit within 3. So if you have Tokyo drifted your monster into 3 enemy units, you can activate this in your turn, charge a bunch of enemy units and deal mortals back to them as they each attack you. So that's a bonus. But they're not shooting you. I guess it works against Unleash Hell as well, right? If you charge a unit and then they shoot you, then at the end of that phase you get to damage them because you suffered wounds or mortal wounds. So there is a way to maximize this. If you take on a lot of enemies at once with your one monster and you force him to be taking a lot of damage, this applies more. Unfortunately, it's not It's not once per time you get damaged as well. If they shoot you with one unit, you don't retaliate, and then they shoot you with another one, and you retaliate again, and they shoot you with another one, you retaliate again. It's just they shoot you, shoot you, shoot you. At the end of the phase, you retaliate once. Yeah, this is bad. This is a poorly designed rule, and it shouldn't even cost a heroic action. I just think it's not very flavorful either. I don't know why Masters of Retaliation. When I think of like Kastelai Dynasty, I think of Blood Knights and Vordry. I don't think, oh man, he's so good at retaliating. Like, he's always got a good comeback. That's not the flavor I think that makes sense for this army. This is a miss, big miss. Might of the Crimson Keep, good. Masters of Retaliation, not good. All right, Battle Crazed. We have a Monstrous Rampage as well. Battle Crazed. Add 1 to the wounds roll for attacks made with melee weapons by this unit in the following combat phase. Hey, that's not bad. It's not interesting, but it's not bad. It competes, I guess, with Raw. So on a 3-up, your opponent essentially has -1 to their save because they can't all out defense. But, you know, if your opponent has a bad save, +1 to wound might be better. And it works against everything. It's not like Titanic Jewel, you can get +1 to hit, which you probably take if you're comparing Titanic Jewel to Battle Crazed. The Vlozzards hit on a 4-up on some of their profiles, but they all wound on like 3-ups. So you're better off buffing the to hit roll than the to wound roll. And you have to do yours first, so you can't you can't charge an enemy monster, then use wait to see if they raw you, and then use all out attack and Battle Crazed, or like if they manage to raw you, then you use Titanic Jewel instead. You don't get that information because I'm pretty sure you activate your monstrous rampages before they activate theirs. It might be worth looking that up, whether it works that way or whether you just decide the order. But if I'm remembering right, monstrous actions specifically say you do all yours first in your turn and then they do all theirs. I suppose on their turn it makes sense. Like if they charge you with a monster, they will roar you first and you get to see whether they're successful. And if they fail at their roar, then maybe you want to use Battle Crazed and you can use all out attack. But if it's their turn, they're probably attacking you, so you probably want to use all out defense anyway. So you might still want to do Titanic Jewel, or maybe even just roar them so they can't all out attack you or boost their armor save. Anyway, I think this has a lot of competition, and I don't think you have enough monsters that is you're going to be using roar over there and monstrous rampage. Battle Crazed over here. I think this is in direct competition with Raw and Titanic Jewel. So I don't think you will see it that often, but it's not bad. It's like sometimes this will come up. If your opponent has a bad armor save, then it's probably better to add 1 to wound rolls than it is to increase your rend. Vlozzards have a bit of rend on them anyway, so if your opponent's on a 5-up or something, they can all out defense it. It's not going to make a big difference. Whereas the +1 to wound might help. So I'm not mad about this. This is horrible. But I guess just don't use it. Like, this is a good ability. If you've got a lot of vampires in your army, this will happen. You'll get these bonuses. You'll get +1 attack. Sometimes you'll get +1 damage. You'll often get extra movement. Which I wish this stacked, because it says you can't get the same ability more than once. I don't know, this would be cool to get lots of extra movement, so you could kill multiple models and get extra movement, but I guess that would add up too quickly. Like if you killed 10 1-wound models, you would get +10 to your movement. That would be insane. But maybe if you got it once per combat phase, which I think is how it works at the end of the combat phase. It also means, incidentally, if you charge your... Oh, that's why it makes you pick. Right, yeah, if you charge your Blood Knights into a unit that has a wounds characteristic of 2 or less and a unit that has a wounds characteristic of 3 or more, 2 different enemy units, and you kill models from each, you have to pick one. You can't get both abilities at once. That makes me really sad. Why can't you do that? You have to pick one relevant ability. So yeah, so I guess keep that in mind. You can't get both abilities at once. If you kill a hero and you kill a model from a unit that has a wounds characteristic of 3 or more that isn't a hero monster, you can't get +1 damage and +1 attack in the same combat phase. That's really lame. I don't know why they've done that. Yeah, stupid restriction. But yeah, I suppose that makes sense why they're saying if 1 or more would apply, then you must pick which one, because you can potentially be killing models from different units in the same turn. I came around to it. To all those people that were frustrated and yelling at their computer screens, I figured it out. I'm with you now. All right. Command traits. Swift and Deadly. You can reroll charge rolls for friendly Kastelai units while they are wholly within 12 of this general. I think we had this before. It's not a bad ability. It's pretty boring, but it's fine. I think I would have preferred like +2 or +1, even +1. I know Fire Slayers have like units within 18 of this general get +1 to their charges. +1 to your charge is really nice because you can re-roll with a command ability and because you have units arriving from reserve. Especially, now we don't have units coming from Endless Legions. Oh, I guess we didn't have units coming from Endless Legions because they used to come in the Battle Shop phase. But you can have units come on from Unquiet Dead, right? Ones that you put in the grave beforehand. They can come back. And then charge, and they can re-roll their charge, but what's better than re-rolling their charge is +1 to their charge with a command point re-roll. So I think it would have been nicer if there was a charge bonus somewhere in the book, but there isn't. This just saves you on command points. Based on the way the rest of the book looks, this army is a lot less command point hungry than it used to be. So this is not as good as it used to be, and it's not that good in the first place. It's not bad. It's like a generically okay command ability. It's just not very interesting. So, all right, moving on. Undead Blade Lord. Once per turn, if this general is on the battlefield, when a friendly Kastelai vampire unit gains an ability with the Might of the Crimson Keep battle trait that this general has not already gained, this general gains the same ability. All right. On the battlefield. So like this used to be, I think, called Power in the Blood or something. And you used to have to be really close for it to happen. But now you can have like your Vlozzard chilling at the back of the battlefield and you can kill a model with like a Vargeist or a Blood Knight unit somewhere, and you can be getting +1 attack and +1 damage and +1 movement speed. I like this. This is pretty good. Chances are you will make use of this, especially if you hold your general back a turn or two. He'll very likely pick up +1 attack because you'll have something in your opponent's army that has 3 wounds, surely. And for sure, you can use a vampire somewhere to damage it. So, like, it's better than it was before. And I'd say probably it's at least more interesting than Swift and Deadly. It might not be more powerful, but this is good. This is a good flavor. Removing the range restriction was the right thing to do. Yeah. This is sweet because it's really easy to proc Might of the Crimson Keep because you only have to kill a model, and then he just gets it as well. Yeah, I like this. I like it. The Shifting Keep. During deployment, if this general is on the battlefield, instead of setting up a Kastelai Blood Knights unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that it is set up in the Crimson Keep as a reserve unit. You can set up 1 unit in the Crimson Keep for each unit you have on the battlefield. At the end of your movement phase, you can set up 1 or more of the reserve units in the Crimson Keep on the battlefield, wholly within 6 of the battlefield edge and more than 9 away from enemy units. Okay, so this is the old ability that we used to have. We used to get it for free as an allegiance ability. And you didn't have to have your general on the battlefield, although there's no real way to have your general off the battlefield. But perhaps if you use like Night Flyer Cloak or something from the realm rules or something. You can't combine that. That's not really a big downside, though. You generally want your general to be on the battlefield, so you're getting command points. But yeah, I suppose you can take this as a command trait if you want to put your Blood Knights in reserve. And if you don't, I guess you take one of these. I think something like Swift and Deadly is a good pair for the old Shifting Keep, right? Because your Blood Knights come on from reserve 9 away, and then you can reroll the charges for all your Blood Knights that are near your general. So they like have a bit of synergy. But now you can't take the Shifting Keep with Swift and Deadly because they're both command traits. It's I didn't really use this ability. Even I usually play Legion of Night, so I could put Blood Knights in reserve because the Legion of Night ability was better than the Kastelai one. It was like the same, but you could put any unit in reserve. And yeah, rarely put Blood Knights in reserve. Really interesting to me. Not a useless ability. Putting things in reserve and having them arrive on the board's edge is frequently very useful. Blood Knights do move pretty quickly, though. They move 10, and they don't have any charge bonuses. Like, they don't have +1 to charge or anything, so usually if they're on the field, they can move fast enough that they can get in range of something and charge it. But if they're off the field, they can't do that because they don't have any charge bonuses. And they also have Riders of Ruin, so that if they're on the field, they can damage things by moving around. It's just you don't get much from putting them in reserve. You do get something. It's not a bad ability. And I guess it's interesting, like, if they didn't have the Shift and Keep in the previous book, if I wasn't spoiled with just getting this rule for free, I think if I saw this, I'd be like, hey, that's pretty cool. I'd be like, that's a good ability. If I just saw this out of context without the previous book, I'd be like, yeah, that's a good command ability. I can put Blood Knights in reserve. That's pretty flavorful. I know, like, the Crimson Keep is a shifting, Transylvania type of, a cool moving castle idea. It's really flavorful. You get your Blood Knights pouring out of this keep to go and harvest the local peasants. Yeah, I think I would really, really like this. I'm just spoiled because the previous book gave it to us for free, but it's a good command trait. You might take this. You might. I think you might take this. You might take this. They're all okay. They're not amazing, but not bad. I'm not feeling bad picking up any of these. I'm probably taking Master of Magic and just picking Flaming Weapon, but yeah, I mean, you might see these. Because, like, Flaming Weapon gives you +1 damage on your 7 claw attacks, whereas this gives you maybe +1 damage on your... it only works on your lance. I forgot that it doesn't work on your mount. So, like, actually, this is a lot worse than I'm thinking. Your general only gets... I guess if he's a Avengorii Lord, he doesn't have a mount. All these profiles will get an extra attack. One of his profiles is useless, but it gets essentially 2 extra attacks and extra damage. Extra damage on the claws would actually be pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe you take this with, like, the Avengorii Lord, because this doesn't affect mounts, and Avengorii Lords don't have a mount. They're just a bunch of profiles on the one guy. So yeah, I think that's all right. And then if you're a Vlozzard, you probably just take rerolls to cast. Probably just take Master of Magic so you can cast Flaming Weapon better or Mystic Shield better. I don't think these get past the Master of Magic hurdle. All right, Artifacts of Power. Grave Sand Shard. Once per battle round, at the end of the battle shop phase, you can return 1 slain model to each friendly Kastelai summonable unit wholly within 18 of the bearer. Once per battle round, so not your phase, their phase, one of those 2 battle shock phases, you can return 1 slain model to each friendly Kastelai summonable unit within 18 of the bearer. That's not good. That's not a good ability. If it didn't say summonable, I feel like this used to not say summonable in the design process. Halfway through, they were like, "Oh, this doesn't say summonable. Surely that means summonable." If this returned one Blood Knight to each, friendly Blood Knight unit that had a slain Blood Knight in it, or a Vargeist, this would be good. This would be really good. But you return one skeleton, one Graveguard, one zombie, one Black Knight to each Kastelai summonable unit wholly within 18 once per battle round. So like maximum you get 5 goes at it. This is garbage. This is horrible. And it makes all the difference that this says summonable. If it's just said Kastelai, this would be really good. You'd be getting Blood Knights back and you'd feel good about it. But it just says summonable. So it's all the stuff that you get lots of. Bringing one back. And why does it say once per battle round? Why doesn't it just work every battle shock phase? Would it be bad? Would it be like overpowered if it worked in every battle shock phase? Healing one slain model? This is not good. Don't take this. Don't take this. Fragment of the Keep. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by enemy units within 3 of the bearer. Okay, so I mentioned this back when we looked at the Avengorii. It's in a different slot. It's in artifacts instead of command traits. Makes a big difference because it's competing with a different set of things. It's competing with Arcane Tome, but now Arcane Tome has been nerfed, particularly for armies like Soulblight, where most of your units, most of your heroes are wizards anyway and can't even take Arcane Tome. There's a lot less competition for artifacts in this book. So -1 to wound on an artifact, only with melee weapons again. I don't know why it's only melee weapons, but sure. By enemies within 3 of the bearer. I think this used to be within 6 in the previous book. So now you have to be in combat. So the difference between 3 and 6 is actually enormous, because 6 means you can move the hero near combat but not be in combat. Now you have to be in combat. But -1 to wound rolls is a good bonus, and it works on everything. So you can, Tokyo drift like you're doing your Master of Retaliation thing, where you're trying to run into as many enemy units as you can. It makes all of them have -1 to wound rolls, and it makes them have -1 to wound rolls even if they're not attacking the bearer. So that's another upside. It's a good artifact. I would take this. In fact, looking at the other two, I would basically only ever take this. This is a good artifact. And with, Arcane Tome being nerfed, you might just be taking this every game if you were playing Kastelai. Sad that it went down. I really don't think it needed to go down. I think these two need to be better. Old Grave Sand Shard was better than this. It used to give you +1 to your ward save, so you had a 5-up ward from Deathless minions. That was good before. I don't know why they got rid of that. This is just horrible. I feel like it used to, halfway through designing the book, it used to bring back Blood Knights, and they thought that was too powerful, so they reduced it or something. But yeah, I mean, I'll be taking this. The Red Casket, add 3 to run rolls and charge rolls for the bearer. I mean, why? I think in the old book you used to have a command trait that let the general run and charge, and this I think used to just be like a once per game add 3 to your charge roll. So you could theoretically have this general that like casts Amethyst and Pinions and auto runs 6, so he's going an extra 12. He moves 14 normally, so he's going like 26 inches, and then charging with +3, so he can charge over your enemy and get sort of behind them. But now you can't run and charge, so this is almost worse than the once per game add 3 to charge rolls, because once you're there, you're there. You really only need it for like that first charge. So yeah, you're not running your Vlozid that often. It wants to shoot as well. It's got a 12-inch shooting weapon. I don't know if any of the... I don't think any of the War Scrolls have run and charge. So my first sort of thought on this is that it's bad and that you won't really take it. You know, adding 3 is nice. Like, you can get... It's a fairly big base. Avengorii Lord is a bit smaller. So you could use this to get big charge rolls and move over your enemy units. So that's a bit better than people think it is. But I can't see that being better than -1 from wound rolls basically ever. So yeah, I think you just take this and forget the other 2 exist if you're playing Kastelai. Command traits are all okay, but you probably just take Master of Magic. So, you know, C, D on the command traits, maybe a C. Some of these are fun. Like, this is good. This is better than... Certainly does something very different to Master of Magic. This thing arguably does the same thing as Master of Magic, because you can just take Flaming Weapon on your Vlozid and you'll get your +1 to damage, whereas this is a different way of getting that +1 damage, and I think a less reliable way. So Shifting Keep is at least like a different type of bonus to just taking Master of Magic. Yeah, this thing I think is hard to use and not good. This thing is competing with something else that... Sorry, I shouldn't just say this thing. Masters of Retaliation is bad. It competes with Finest Hour. Battle Crazed is fine, but again, sort of competes with Titanic Duel and Raw. So, like, not good, not good, not good, not great. Like, okay, I guess. It's a good artifact. And this got a lot better. And I think in Kastelai, Blood Knight's a battle line. I should mention Avengorii got Bargeist as battle line as well. So those are upsides. Not wholly impressed by the Kastelai Dynasty or the Avengorii Dynasty, but this is cool. This is better. This is much improved than it was previously. Yeah, I don't think you end up using this that much or this that much. You don't really care about what you take here, but you know, reroll charges within 12 is fine. Yeah. It's an okay sub-faction. I probably won't be taking either of those sub-factions very often, but that's okay, because the other sub-factions are, in my opinion, much better. Alrighty, different set of screenshots. We're on a different table here. Legion of Blood. Battle traits, unparalleled expertise. If a friendly Legion of Blood vampire hero is within 3 of any enemy units, it is bloodthirsty. If a friendly Legion of Blood vampire hero is more than 3 from all enemy units, it is empowered. Alright, so that's like Ogres, Hungry, and Eating. This is a very neat design. If you're in combat, you're bloodthirsty. If you're not, you're empowered. Add 1 to the attack's characteristics of melee weapons used by a unit that is bloodthirsty. Add 1 to casting rolls, dispelling, and unbinding rolls for a unit that is empowered. Neat. I notice that this doesn't say only applies to mounts. Only applies to the unit and not the mount. So this should, if you've got it on like a Vlozid, you get +1 attack on the whole set of profiles. So this is immediately doing something that this is not, and giving you like this thing. Even if you, over here, your Vlozid has to kill a model with a wounds category of 3 or more that's not a hero monster, and it gets +1 attack on just its lance or its sword. In Legion of Blood, you get +1 attack on the lance or the sword, and on the jaw attacks and on the claw attacks, and you just get them for being within 3. And to boot, you get +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls when you're not within 3, which is excellent because that's when you'll be casting your flaming weapon, and getting the damage that, you know, in Kastelai you have to be killing something to get. So I already think this is much better than previously. It's not as good as possibly the +2 we used to get with the Tome Celestial rules for Legion of Blood, but it applies to all the casts, I guess. With the new Arcane Tome, we only have 1 cast on our vampires no matter what. Maybe they didn't know that when they were writing this, but yeah, +1 to casts on all of our vampire heroes is neat. +1 to the attacks characteristic. This also looks like it works on Neferata herself. In the past, I was a bit disappointed the way the ability sort of stacked up. They didn't really benefit the named characters in their own factions very much, like the Legion of Blood expertise rule that looked a lot like this worked for vampire lords specifically, so it didn't work for Vengorian lords, and it didn't work for Neferata. But this one should work for a Vengorian lord. Again, they got 3 profiles, they get an extra attack on each. Should work for Neferata. It gives her +1 to her casting rolls, which is big because she's got a good spell. Yeah, I think this is a really neat rule that does sort of all the things you want it to. Means that they don't get their casting roll while they're in combat, and they don't get their, I guess the attacks bonus only matters in combat, but it sort of balances it a little bit. They're not getting both bonuses at once. I think this is a good sort of design philosophy for vampires. I said this in the sort of the criticism video of the 2nd edition Battletome. Vampires in the lore are meant to be sort of good at everything, and if you make a rule set like that, then they're just overpowered. But if you make them good at different things at different times, so they're good at combat while they're fighting, but while they're good at combat, they're not as good at casting, so they're sort of specializing. The way that Kato Etikar is written, he can move fast, or he can cast well, or he can fight well, but he has to pick one of them. I think that's a really good design philosophy for making a unit that is good at everything without making it overpowered. You make it good at each thing only one at a time. And yeah, this is pretty good. You cast your spells and then you go into combat. It feels good playing it. And then just follow up. You don't have that +1 casting later on while you are still fighting. But yeah, I really like this rule. I think it's really well written, really well thought out, really easy to apply, and really straightforward. I like Legion of Blood so far. I need to have myself a drink, or you're going to hear mouth noises the whole fucking time. Okay. The Coven of New Lamia. So you get 2 heroic actions in Legion of Blood instead of a monstrous action. It's all just heroic actions. And I think this is interesting because in the past, in Soulblight, you have this competition for who is the vampiriest vampire faction. Legion of Blood obviously cares about vampire lords, and Kastelai cares about blood knights, like with the shifting keep and the other allegiance ability. They benefit the units of vampires. Legion of Blood benefit the heroes a bit more, and the main hero that you're benefiting in Legion of Blood is the vampire lord on zombie dragon. So I think it's unusual that Blood has the heroic actions and not the monstrous actions, because Kastelai would focus more on like blood knights, and they won't be using the monstrous action as much. That was my thought anyway, but I guess if we're focusing on the heroes, the foot vampire lords, they want to use heroic actions. But actually, it sort of works out really well when I now that I see the rules. It's not what I would have anticipated, but it kind of works in hindsight. So, premeditated bloodshed. Pick 1 Legion of Blood vampire hero. Until the end of this turn, ward rolls cannot be made for wounds or mortal wounds caused by attacks made by this hero. Okay. So another little bugbear. Why is it just attacks? If I'm a vampire and I'm an empowered spellcaster, why can't I have a premeditated type of spell casting situation to kill my opponents? Why is it only attacks that I can ignore ward rolls for? Why can't I do it with spells? I think that's a bit odd, but normally ignoring wards is a good ability. Unfortunately, it's only wounds and mortal wounds caused by attacks made by this hero as well. So it's not like the Nurgle Demon Prince ability where it just turns off wards for everything within 3. The actual unit using this heroic action has to do the damage, which means they have to have a good combat profile for this to mean anything. So it's not very useful on your foot vampire lords. Much more useful on like a vampire lord on zombie dragon, or maybe a Vengorian lord. I do think that this place, putting turning wards off as a heroic action is a really good spot to put them. Where you have this problem, like with Masters of Retaliation and Battle Craze, where they compete with the generic options, something like turning a ward off is a situationally very powerful ability. If your opponent has a good ward, like if you're fighting Indrasta or something, turning off that 4-up ward is massive. You like do double damage to that unit. But in a situation where they don't have any ward, it doesn't do anything. So putting it as a heroic action is really neat, because when you want it, you're like, I can use the heroic action to turn their ward off, and I can do a bunch of extra damage to them. But when you don't want it, you're like, I'm just going to take a chance at a command point, or I'm going to take Immortal Majesty, or whatever. I'm just going to do some other heroic action, and I'm not going to feel bad about having this option. Whereas if it's in like an artifact or a command trait, you put it in your list, and then they don't have wards, and you just feel really bad. You feel bad that you wasted your artifact or command trait. This, I guess, you maybe feel a little bit bad because you had to pick Legion of Blood to get access to this ability, and maybe you're not even going to use it. But at the very least, in terms of what's happening on the board, you're still using a heroic action that's still impacting the game. And you don't feel so bad for having this option because it doesn't cost as much when you don't use it, basically. So I really like this as a spot. I think it could be more powerful if it like affected units nearby instead of only accounting for the attacks. It would have been nice if you could use Arcane Bolt or like Vile Transference or the Curse of Exsanguination that's on the Vlozid War Scroll, and you can bypass the ward with spells as well. I don't know why they always say attacks made by this hero, and surely it could just be ward rolls cannot be made for wounds or mortal wounds caused by spells, abilities, or attacks or something, or like caused by this hero, and it just sort of work. But I think attacks might clean up some edge cases or something, because you always know what the attacks of the hero are, but sometimes you don't necessarily know if wounds caused by an effect are actually caused by the hero or are sort of caused by an interaction between the hero and something else, and it can create these like weird edge rule cases that are sort of hard to work out. I think that would be worth it, but they haven't done that. So not a bad ability. So we've got a good ability, an okay ability. I'm happy with that. So what does Immortal Majesty do? Another heroic action. Pick one friendly Legion of Blood vampire hero. Until the end of this turn, your opponent must spend 2 command points instead of 1 to issue the all-out defense and inspiring presence commands to enemy units within 12 of that hero. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm not certain about this ability. This is very different. We didn't have anything like this before. We didn't have anything like the ward thing before either. It looks useful. Making it harder to use Inspiring Presence or All-Out Defense looks useful. It does have this problem of, again, your opponent's in control here. Once you use this, your opponent gets to make the decision, do I want to spend the 2 command points, or do I want to, is it not worth it? But on the other hand, this effect is pretty powerful, right? When we see like Total Eclipse, having to spend 2 command points on everything is certainly a really big setback. I wonder how it interacts with things like Iron Jaws. Like if they issue all that attack, they can like issue it, all that defense, sorry. I think they can issue it another 2 times for free from the Maw Crusher in Iron Jaws. And I wonder if they're issuing a free one, whether they have to spend anything, whether this interacts with them at all. They could just issue like all that defense to a different unit and then use free ones and just get around Immortal Majesty. And there's also this issue where, if all that defense costs more near the Vampire Lord, we'll just use it away from him. We'll use it in a different fight. Whereas with Total Eclipse, the whole board is covered. So it makes a big difference there. It only affects these 2 things. So like, things like Total Eclipse really drain your opponent. They can't use their command points at all. Basically, it's like halving the amount of command points they have in pool, whereas this just means, well, maybe I'll use an all-out attack instead, or like a redeploy instead. So we want to issue to enemy units within 12. Okay, so it counts where the enemy unit is. I think that's probably the better way to do it, rather than the issuing unit. So I think this is okay. It might depend on like how many command points your opponent has. If they're an army that has a low command point economy, and you want to reduce their ability to defend themselves and use Inspiring Presence, like they're going to have to use 4 to use both, right? And often these have a similar role. All-out defense and Inspiring Presence mean like I can all-out defense, lose fewer models, so I'll lose fewer to Battle Shock later on, or I can accept that I'm going to lose a lot of models and then use Inspiring Presence to make sure they don't all run away. So either way, I kind of preserve my unit. And if you use both, it can add a lot of durability to a unit that would otherwise definitely be being destroyed and then running off the table. But your opponent's going to have to use... They probably only get 4. Like, if they go second in the battle round, they get 4 command points total if they're a normal low command point army. And again, I suppose it's good that this is an option, because against armies like the new OBR that they're going to have like 14 command points a turn, this doesn't do that much, and they have a whole bunch of other command abilities. This is not that important to them, but I guess you just don't have to use it against them. So that's an upside. This is really hard to evaluate whether this is good. I think this is good. 12 inches is a pretty big circle. I've just thought of something else. The Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, the Zombie Dragon has a rule that stops people using Inspiring Presence, I'm pretty sure, if they're within 3. So this is more useful on like a foot vampire than on him, because the Velocity is going to turn off Inspiring Presence half the time anyway. But I guess reducing all that defense is also like, it's like having Rend. It's like Raw or something. But I guess they can get it. I don't know how to evaluate this. I think it's okay. I think there will be situations where you use it. You'll often get to your heroic action and you'll be like, excuse me, sir, how many command points do you have? You want to make sure, like, if they've only got 2, then just activating this might stop them redeploying. I mean, once they redeploy, then you know they can't Inspiring Presence or all-out defense near that hero. And that can increase the damage of units near that guy. I think that's pretty good. I think it will be useful. I think this is an okay ability. Even the fact I have to think about it, it's not just like trash out of hand. I can't think of like... I can think of situations and ways that it's not good, but then like you don't have to use that in those situations. You can just use the normal, I'll get a command point, or heroic recovery, or I'll finest hour, or whatever the fuck it is. You just use normal heroic actions. These don't really compete with the set of heroic actions in the book. The problem that Kastelai has is that their bonuses compete with the generic bonuses. These things are all just good. They're like add options to your army. This is just a straight buff. These are just 2 neat options that you have while playing Legion of Blood. And sometimes you'll be really thankful that you have them. Sometimes your opponent will have a ton of command points and this won't mean anything. Sometimes your opponent won't have any ward and this won't mean anything. And then you think, you know what, I'm okay with that. I still get my +1 attack. I still get my +1 to cast. I just use my normal heroic actions. I don't feel bad about it. I like it. I like Legion of Blood. And I'm pretty sure they have good command traits and artifacts. But let's have a look. So, command traits. Instruments of Neferata's Will. Tailored Downfall. After deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can pick 1 enemy hero on the battlefield. The Strike Last effect applies to that unit while it is within 3 of this general. It's not very good. Actually, I remember these. These are not good. So, why is this not good? It relies on a hero. A lot of the time, your opponent won't have a hero that is worth putting this on. Right? It's a Strike Last effect. Strike Last is pretty good. And if your opponent has like, say like Archeon, okay, a really powerful hero, you can make him Strike Last. But that also means that your general is now fighting Archeon. And Archeon still does all his full damage. He just strikes last. So like, there's a benefit. You can stack a bunch of units into him. So you can charge with your general and some Blood Knights and some Vargeist and whatever. And you can try and take him down before he fights. But then he can kill your hero. He can fight back. You're having to, like, pick a fight with Archaon. Against something like Gargants, I guess, like, it's better than not having it. Don't get me wrong. But I'm trying to build, like, a best case scenario. And if they're too good, then you don't want to be near them with your general. If they're too bad, like if they're just some random 5-wound wizard, then you don't care if they strike last, so it's not useful there. You really need this middle ground where, like, before you didn't want to fight them because they didn't have strikes last, but now you're okay with fighting them because they do have strikes last. I just don't think that comes up very often. There'll be many, many times where you pick this and it does nothing. I don't think this is very good. Your opponent can just, like, avoid the dude that has this ability, or they won't have a hero that it works on, or the hero that will be, like, too good that it works on. Yeah, I don't see you taking this one very often, but the others are not good, so maybe. Game Hunter. After deployment, but before the first battle round begins, you can pick one enemy monster that is not a hero. I'm not sure you even need to finish the ability. Your opponent doesn't have any of these. You can pick one enemy monster that is not a hero. They don't take those. Nobody takes those. I don't think I've ever seen one of those on the other side of the table from me. All right. Oh, that's a lie. I've seen a Mind Stealer Spheranx, but it's no longer a monster. This is very, very restrictive, right? You can almost never use this. So regardless of what it does, you basically won't take it. But let's see what it does. The attacks characteristic of that unit's melee weapons is 1, while that unit is within 3 of this general. Okay, so that's a pretty big debuff. That's like what Evia does. And I think if you look at my video on Evia works against monsters that are heroes, and she's still too specific, I think. This only works against monsters that aren't heroes, so you're never going to take it. If this was any monster, I think it might still be too restrictive. If this was any hero, then you're getting there, you're getting useful. And it is... it's only 1. Like, Evia works on all monsters, but this only works on the 1. So if they have multiple monsters, like if you're playing against, I guess, the enemy Avengorii list and they take like 3 Terrorgeists or whatever, you can only pick 1 of them. This is trash. This is horrible. And even if, like, even if this second half of the ability said, after, like, you know, you pick one enemy hero, there's no monster, that unit is destroyed. Like, if you just instantly killed them, this would still be bad, right? There's almost no way that this second sentence, like, you gain control of that monster, right? Even that would still be a bad command trait, because nobody takes this unit. This is just bad. Don't take it. All right. I'm sad that they printed this. All right, doomed minions. After deployment, but before the first battle round begins, okay, so they all do this, you can pick up to D3 units that are not heroes or monsters. Attacks made with melee weapons that target that unit score a hit on a 2+, on an unmodified hit roll of a 2+, while that unit is within 3 of this general. Okay, so you get D3, which is going to be 1. You get D3 enemy units. They can't be heroes or monsters, so if your opponent is running like a monster army, this doesn't work. But chances are they'll have D3 units that are not heroes or monsters. And then you hit on a 2+ instead of whatever you would normally hit on. I think this is okay. They're more likely to have something that's not a hero or monster. I don't know if it's something that you care about killing necessarily, but you have a bunch of stuff in this book that hits on a 4, and you lost a lot of access to your buffs that buff your hit and wound profile. So, I mean, I think this is probably the one you pick out of these three. You probably still just pick Master of Magic. But this is okay. I wish it was 3 or 2 and not D3. Because when it's 1, you'll feel bad. But if your opponent has like... Your opponent's very likely to have a unit that is not a hero or monster that you care about how much damage you do to it. Whereas they often won't have a hero that you care about whether it strikes last. They definitely won't have a hero that is not a monster that you care about reducing its attacks to 1. So of the 3, this is the one that passes the bar of like, you might actually take this. I don't think you do. I think you take Master of Magic until they nerf it. They're going to eventually nerf all the generic stuff until nobody takes it. And then I think you'll just be taking this and you'll be like, yay, some games I get plus... I get hits on a 2-up. They have to be within 3 of the general. Like, I feel like if it just applied the effect, it wouldn't feel like a command trait, but it would be better. But you have to get the general to it. But I think at least, like, if you've got a Velocid, a lot of it's I think it's draw attacks and its claw attacks all hit on 4s, which is pretty bad, and its normal attacks only hit on 3s. So you're picking a unit and making you hit on a 2-up. That's actually pretty good. Yeah, I think you get the extra attacks. You're doing a fair bit of damage hitting on a 2-up. You can ignore wards. Yeah, I think you just take this. Very rarely you're going to put this. If this was like an optional thing, then I think it would be nice. Like if you had, this could be one thing where like it says Legion of Blood, you pick one of these 3 effects: Tailored Downfall, Game Hunter, or Doom Minions after deployment but before the first battle round begins. So they literally only have one command trait to choose from, but that command trait is like something hunter. It's premeditated hunter, and then you pick whether it's heroes, monsters that are not heroes, or other stuff, and then you get the effect. They could have just done that so that like you're always just choosing at the start of the game, so you're not pre-guessing what your opponent has in their army, because the big problem with all 3 of these is I don't know what's in my opponent's army, but I'm trying to pick a command ability that is based on what's in my opponent's army. So I just can't do it. I just can't make these decisions until I know what's in my opponent's army. I don't have to like guess on what's likely to be in there. So why don't you just give me an ability where I pick this thing, I just have a generic, premeditated hunter ability, and then I just pick which of these bonuses I get when the battle round starts. That's silly. I don't know why they do this. So these are actually bad. I was wrong. These are bad. Doom Minions, I think, is the one you take. In reality, I think you just take Master of Magic. All right. Artifacts of Power. Treasures of the Bloody Court. Amulet of Screams. Oh, it's coming back. Roll a dice each time an enemy unit within 18 of the bearer successfully casts a spell that is not unbound. On a 3+, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds after the effect of that spell has been resolved. So I've seen Gobsprak work. Gobsprak is like every time he unbinds a thing, you take D3 mortal wounds, and then once per game he can unbind on 3d6 instead of 2, and if he unbinds with a value of higher than 10, I think he does d6 mortal wounds. But Gobsprak unbinds 2 spells a turn and has like a range of 30. This works when the spells are successful and only has range 18. I don't think you take this. I think if it did every time they cast a spell, it did the mortal wounds, whether they're successful or not, and it did it before they rolled. Like, I'm going to cast a spell, I take D3 mortal wounds, then I can cast the spell. Then maybe this is good. I certainly does something to Nagash. Like, if you're going to cast 8 spells and get most of them off, he might take 5 D3 mortals, but most wizards cast one spell, and most wizards screw it up. You have to it has to be not unbound as well. So if you unbind the spell, you don't get to do the mortal wounds. Why isn't it? This would be much better if it was if an enemy wizard casts a spell within 18 of the bearer, you get a bonus to unbind it, and they take mortal wounds or something. I don't like this. I don't think you use this at all. I don't think this is very good. But your opponent might just not have wizards, or might have so few wizards that maybe they just take the Arcane Tome and they're like, I'm going to cast Mystic Shield with this guy once a turn, and it's alright if he takes D3 mortal wounds. You're probably not going to be within 18 of him anyway. The low range and the fact that it's only unbound things, and the fact that it's on a 3-up you do D3, why isn't it just D3 mortal wounds? They already successfully cast the spell. I should just get the ability, but I have to roll to see if something happens, and then I roll and I probably get a 1 on my D3. Not good. I'm not going to take this. This is bad. This is not fun. It's bad. Orb of Enchantment. I think this is the same as what it used to be. Once per battle at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one enemy hero within 3 inches of the bearer and roll a dice. On a 3-up, that hero cannot be picked to fight in that phase. So, it's a once per battle thing that works on a 3-up. That's very sad. It's thoroughly disappointing. And it only works against a hero. So you can't have a unit or something. It's real hard to leverage this. It's a powerful effect. Cannot be picked to fight as big. And you can charge with your Vlozid into their big Maw Crusher thing, and 2/3 of the time they don't get an activation. And you've got this general threat thing where you're if you charge me with your hero, there's a good chance you don't activate. A bit like Be'lakor, where if you know if your unit gets Be'lakored, and you're in a fight, you want to try and retreat out of there probably, because there's a better chance than not that your dude isn't going to be able to fight. So you may as well try and retreat. There's a good chance you won't be able to retreat either, but if you can retreat, let's just say that he fails the roll in the movement phase and you're thinking, do I want to retreat or not? You probably don't want to be in a fight where on a 3-up you don't get to fight. So there's a case where this is powerful. It plays a bit of mind games with your opponent. But I think the big downside is not necessarily the 3+1s per game thing. It's that you can only use it on an enemy hero. If you could use it against any unit, I think it would be very different. You'd be able to put your Vlozid with the Orb of Enchantment in front of a unit of Chaos Chosen, and your opponent has to think, well, do I want to charge with this Chosen unit and have the Chosen 2/3 of the time just not activate? Right? They don't get to fight at all. Do I want to pick that fight? Well, I have to pick it with something, right? I have to fight this Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon at some point. So I have to proc it with something, but he can choose not to proc it, right? He can choose not to turn the ability on. So if I charge him with some garbage, he just doesn't use the orb and he fights it. If I charge him with something really valuable, he activates the orb, and there's a good chance that your valuable thing doesn't get to fight. So I feel like the mind games alone would make this work if it wasn't about heroes. But what happens is you take this, and then your enemy doesn't have any good heroes, and you wasted your artifact. So these two are bad, but we don't have many good options at all now, because Arcane Tome is not really useful for us, unless I guess if we're taking a White King, we might use Arcane Tome. But thankfully, this ability, this artifact, this is good. This is the old Ethereal Amulet. We used to have Soulbound Garments, which was +1 to our save in Legion of Blood in the previous book, but now we have immune to modifiers, ignore modifiers, positive and negative for save rolls for attacks that target the bearer. Works against melee attacks, works all the time. You're just hard on a 3-up save all the time. This is really good. Generally, your opponent is going to have -1 rend. Often they'll have -2 rend. Sometimes they'll have -3 rend. If your opponent has -2 rend, then it's like you've got all that attack and Mystic Shield. That's how much this is doing for you. It's a lot of defensive power. And I think you'll see the way the new hunger works, and the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon got a wound bump. This is the old Ethereal Amulet Vozid monster coming back. This thing is a terror. Sorry, my mouth is way too dry. So, I think between maybe getting some bonuses to hit against some units in your enemy's army, ignoring save modifiers, potentially being able to shut down wards, being able to force all that defense to be more expensive. You still have access on a velocity, you still have access to raw, so this is not necessarily that good. And the Inspiring Presence thing on a velocity, they're already not using Inspiring Presence, so this is not necessarily going to be used on that, but you're getting +1 to cast and +1 attack. Like, all these things stack up onto the one Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon that is your general. And you can take like Neferata in the same list. She's quite good. I think this is good. I think Legion of Blood works well. No bonuses for any of your units, all just the heroes, but they're pretty good bonuses. And I don't think you feel bad. I think when you take these sorts of things, you just play whatever list you like, you take whatever units you like, and you get some bonuses for your Velocid, and you feel really good about them. So I don't mind Legion of Blood. I think that's a good faction, and I'll play that faction when I want to play my Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. I want him to be good. One of the good 3 factions, I think. Avengorii and Kastelai, I'm not big on, although we'll see Vorderai is pretty good. But Legion of Blood, good stuff. Good stuff. I'm into it, even with the bad command traits. All right, Legion of Night. Legion of Night was my favorite faction in both Legions of Nagash and the original Soulblight Gravelords book. And it's got big changes here. So, battle trait, Ageless Cunning. Once per turn during the enemy charge phase. Enemy charge phase. It's already going to be good. During the enemy charge phase, after an enemy unit finishes a charge move, you can pick one friendly Legion of Night unit that is within 12 of that enemy unit, and more than 3 from all enemy units. That unit can attempt a charge. This is a very good ability. It's very hard to imagine how it works without using it. But I know charging in your opponent's charge phase is very powerful. Even with the restriction of having to be within 12 of an enemy unit that charged, and even obviously you have to not be in combat to charge as well. I think this is a really, really good ability. It's also good considering our new Endless Legions. Lets us put units in really inconvenient spots for our opponent. So you could always summon end of your opponent's move phase, they're going to charge your unit or something, who knows. You can put another unit sort of behind that unit, but within 12 of that model or that unit, so that when they charge the thing they're clearly intending on charging, you can use Ageless Cunning to charge them back. And they find themselves in a combat with a lot more enemies than they initially thought. There's lots and lots of little things like this. You don't have to charge the thing that charged you. You just have to be within 12 of it. So it could be like you've summoned a unit and they charge off an objective and you charge onto the objective they just left. You don't even have to charge. You can charge completely the opposite direction. You just have to be within 12, not even wholly within 12. You are going to get lots of options to just get a free movement in a really awkward spot in your opponent's turn. Also worth keeping in mind that if the turn order is they're going first and you're going second, if you charge them in the end of their charge phase, you might screw up their order of activations, especially if you have a unit that fights first, which you might do. We'll see that later. If you have a unit that fights first, you can really screw with their activations. You can screw with their activations anyway. You can potentially wipe out a unit with the thing you're charging with, and then you'll have a turn straight after. So you'll get to go again with the thing that you charged with. Right? This is a really, really powerful ability, and it's especially powerful if you're going second in the battle round. But there are just lots of ways to use this. It's very hard to imagine them all. I'm not that kind of player. I'm not that good at the game, probably. But I know charging in other people's turns is really good, and the limitations on this aren't that big. I think compared to what we used to have, the bait, and we used to put things in reserve, I think largely putting things in reserve was not very useful because we could already put things in reserve, and we can still do that. We can put our summonable units in reserve, and they can arrive 9 away from out of grave sites. Like it's most of the stuff we want to teleport, we can already do. And it wasn't that often we wanted to put things like Blood Knights or Vargeists or whatever in reserve. We can put Vargeists in reserve anyway because they got that on their War Scroll. So I think I'm happy to give up the old Ageless Cunning to get this. And the bait, I think, is, again, a worthy trade. Plus one to save on Death Rattle units was neat. Oh, I guess Death Rattle and Dead Walker in the previous book. That's a neat bonus, but you'll see we actually kind of still have that. They've done the same thing as Kastelai. They put that on a command trade, I'm pretty sure, and it actually got better. So I'm very, very happy with this. I think this is truly Ageless Cunning. This is much sneakier than having units come on from reserve. Everyone and their mums can arrive by reserve. The poster boys are all about that deep strike. They come down in lightning. They're not sneaky. They're brazen, right? Legion of Night. This is sneaky. Charging in your charge phase, you're not expecting that shit. This is much better. This is much more flavorful, much more interesting. I really like it. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention something about Legion of Blood. They still get Black Knights as battle line. Just to, I guess, interrupt my own flow. All right. Ageless Cunning, excellent. Top tier, A+. Love it. Swift Form. At the start of the hero phase, you can carry out this heroic action with a friendly Legion of Night vampire hero instead of any other heroic... Yep, the normal stuff. Swift Form. Pick one friendly Legion of Night vampire hero, more than 3 from all enemy units. Remove that unit from the battlefield and set it up again on the battlefield, more than 9 from all enemy units. This hero cannot move in the following movement phase. Oh, this is a very nice ability. This is very good for things like the current Cunning Maneuver. You can just pick your vampire up and he can teleport. He doesn't need Tunnel Master. He can just do it and he can get Cunning Maneuver very easily. He can do Desecrate, right? You can just pick your hero up. I'm going to go desecrate their lands on this unguarded bit of terrain. Just going to land my one hero over here and take that battle tactic. I'm going to, like in previous editions, I'm going to do Barge Through. I'm going to have 2 units wholly in enemy territory. Oh, one of them is just going to be my hero. He's just going to teleport to the back corner of the board. All right. And in your hero phase, he's going to teleport again. All right. Very, very sneaky. Very cool. You can do some neat stuff with this. You can get very close to the enemy in your turn and then just teleport away. It doesn't matter. It's very, very cool that happens in the hero phase. Unfortunately, you can't teleport out of combat, but I think it is excellent. It would be very overpowered, I think, if you could teleport out of combat with any vampire hero. You can still shoot. So you can teleport your Velocid and still use the breath weapon on it. The breath weapon went up to 12 inches on both the Velocid and the Terrorgeist. I think has 12-inch range still. So you can teleport and still shoot with the breath weapon attack. So that's very good. Can't move in the following movement phase, but can still charge. No restriction on charging or piling in or anything like that. So you're still eligible to do your 9-inch charge. I think this is very sneaky. This is very on brand for Legion of Night. it is the compensation. I'll spoil this now. Manfred lost his ability to teleport. This is what we got in return, being able to sort of slightly different. I wouldn't even say it's worse. Before, Manfred, if he wanted to teleport, had to get in combat. But these guys can teleport. They can't be in combat. But the different requirement is not necessarily a worse requirement. Being able to do this in both hero phases, you can teleport a vampire in your hero phase and then teleport a vampire in their hero phase. Very valuable. The army's not as starved for command points. A lot of the command abilities are changing, so you don't need to spend command points. So giving up your heroic action doesn't feel as bad because you're not desperately trying to roll those 4-ups. And yeah, I think this is a really good compensation for getting rid of that Manfred ability that was really frustrating for a lot of opponents, especially if they're playing melee only. This is still frustrating for your opponents, but in a much more intentional way, I think. So I'm excited to use this. I'm excited to use both of these. They combo pretty well. You've got a lot of movement happening in your opponent's turn. Your heroes can teleport in their turn, and then they can charge in their turn. There's some really, really neat, I was saying, you can summon using endless legions. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I did mess that up. You can't use endless legions. This is what I was thinking of. Can't use endless legions to set a unit up and then charge with it using Ageless Cunning, because it says you can't charge in the same turn. I'm very sorry. I was incorrect about that. This is the thing you can charge with. Sorry, I was thinking about this. So you can teleport your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon to be sort of behind the unit that they're going to charge, and then you can charge with this with Ageless Cunning. So very, very neat. You can do that, the same thing with Manfred as well. And I'll tell you what, Manfred has always strikes first when he charges. So doing this sort of thing, I think it's just going to be a very, very interesting, fun ability for you to have. There are lots of creative ways to use it. Lots of battle tactics you can pick up with a teleport like this. It feels a bit like you're playing KO, like getting this free teleport every turn. I'm very, very excited to use Swift Form and Ageless Cunning. A+, very good abilities. All right. We've got 2 good things, so we have to have a bad thing. We've got the 1 heroic action and 1 monstrous rampage in Legion of Night, which I think makes sense. So at the end of the charge phase, you can carry this out with a zombie dragon or Terrorgeist. And I think, could be wrong, don't think I'm wrong, pretty sure this is a zombie dragon, meaning anything that has the keyword zombie dragon. So if you're a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, you can still use this. So that's good to know, because you're probably not taking the Terrorgeist or the Zombie Dragon by themselves. You're probably just taking a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. So this is very good if you can use that there. If you can't, it's useless. But yeah, my understanding of the rules, like Legion of Night Vampire Hero, that's keywords. This is keywords too. So we can use the Vossard. Into the Jaws of Death. Pick 1 enemy unit within 6 of this unit that made a charge move in this phase and roll 2d6. Add 3 to the roll if that enemy unit is within half an inch of this unit. If the roll is greater than the unmodified charge roll for that charge move, this unit can attack with its Pestilential Breath or Death Shriek in this phase and must target that enemy unit. Okay, so worth noting, you can pick a unit within 6, not within 3. Most monstrous rampages require you to be within 3 of the enemy, like Stomp and Roar and things like that. This one, you can use it if you're within 6. A bit like Unleash Hell. In fact, it's exactly what it's like. It's another Unleash Hell. So you can put your Vlozzard behind a screen, and they can charge the screen. You can Unleash Hell, and you can use this monstrous rampage, even if you're not in combat, to shoot at them. The problem is, You roll 2d6 and you have to roll greater than their unmodified charge roll. To be fair, you get to see their charge roll first. So it could be that they have a really bad charge roll. Then you might want to use this. But you have to exceed their 2d6 with your 2d6, which is unlikely to happen. I guess I shouldn't say unlikely, but less likely than it is likely. You know, you fail sort of 6/10 of the time, that sort of thing. You do get a bonus if you're within half an inch. So if they actually charge your Velocid, you can use this and you've got a much better chance of succeeding. And you just get to shoot in the charge phase with this ability. And you can shoot twice if you unleash hell as well. And they happen... Ooh, I'm going to have to check the tapes on how Unleash Hell works. Whether Unleash Hell just gives you -1 for that phase, or whether it gives you -1 for that attack. So it'll be a charge phase. So that sort of changes how good it is if you can use it both in the same turn. Charge phase command abilities. Unleash Hell. Okay. So Unleash Hell's only -1 to the actual Unleash Hell attacks. So if you use this and you use Unleash Hell, you can shoot twice at the unit that charged you. And you only get -1 to hit on the attacks from the Unleash Hell. So that's a bonus too. I do think this competes pretty heavily with Stomp. Obviously, shooting with your breath weapon is going to do damage, and Stomp's going to do damage. Roar's going to increase your combat effectiveness and potentially cause more damage. Titanic Jewel might cause more damage. It heavily depends on how good Pestilential Breath and Death Shriek are. So I guess we'll have to maybe I'll just have a quick look at them now. So War Scrolls, we're looking at the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. All right. Let's just have a quick look at Pestilential Breath. So we've got range 12, D6 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1, 3 damage. Okay, 3 damage is a lot. 1 rend is not great. D6 attacks is horrible. I don't think there's any way where you don't get any bonus on these attacks like you used to auto hit or anything like that. It's not like you get auto 6 if they have 6 or more models or anything like that. There's no mount trait to like re-roll this D6 like we had with the D6 damage before. This is still... Before we had 1 attack that did D6 damage. Now we have D6 attacks that do 3. Theoretically, this has like 3 times the maximum damage. Being able to shoot it in an Unleash Hell and shoot it again for free could cause a lot of damage. There's no like penalty for shooting a 1 wound thing. One model unit. Before we used to prefer to shoot many model units because you got an automatic hit. So I don't know. This is not an amazing ability, but I think the fact that you get to see the enemy charge roll and you get to add 3 to the roll if you're within half an inch. And I think, and this might be a weird timing sequencing thing, but during the enemy charge phase, after they finish a charge move, so you can activate this first, right? So if you've got a screen, they will charge your screen. You can use Ageless Cunning to charge with your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. Then, at the end of the charge phase, you can use Into the Jaws of Death, and you'll be within half an inch, so you can add 3 to the roll. But I also think... So the timing thing is, when you activate this, you can also activate Unleash Hell. I have to look at it again. So after an enemy finishes a charge move, so they trigger at the same time, which causes an ordering problem, and I think it's the player whose turn it is that gets to sequence them. But maybe you get to sequence them because you're activating them. if that makes sense. Like, you can just choose to do one and then choose to do the other. It's not like two things are triggered off the one thing. You've got two options that just happen to be at the same time. So I need like an FAQ on this to know, like, I'm the player that has the option to use both of these, and the option comes up at the same time. But surely that means I can just say, yes, I'm going to use this one, then I'm going to use this one. But I think the sequencing things might be confusing because they trigger when things happen at the same time. I think the player whose turn it is gets to order them. So I'm not sure whether this is a trigger or whether you just have the options occurring at the same time and it's your choice on how you execute them. But anyway, if you're within 6 of the unit that they charge, you can use Ageless Cunning to charge, and as far as I can tell, you can use Unleash Hell as well. So you're behind your screen with a Velocid, they charge the screen, you Unleash Hell and use Ageless Cunning. And you charge in, and then at the end of the charge phase, you use Into the Jaws of Death, and you get to shoot again, and you'll be within half because you charge them. So potentially get to shoot them twice, and you've charged them when they weren't even charging your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. It sounds more complicated than it is. I mean, you can do all this stuff anyway. If they just straight up charge your Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, you can definitely use Unleash Hell, and then later in the phase you can use Into the Jaws of Death. It's just that all these sort of things happen around the same unit and the same sort of tricks, so you can combine them all to make them a lot more effective. You can teleport your Velocid behind a thing that behind a screen at the start of the turn, and then when they charge the screen, you can charge them, and you can Unleash Hell, and you can use Into the Jaws of Death. And I think stacking all this together might end up being a really powerful sort of play, or giving you a lot of options for powerful plays. And the Breath Weapon, even though it's only D6, I'm pretty mad that it's D6. It would be better if it was more consistent, but on average, I think that weapon is not a bad weapon. It's probably too inconsistent to bother doing with this sort of stuff, but I don't know. I don't know if you're giving up your monstrous rampage to do this, unless you're like, if you are 6 away, this is free, so I guess this is good. But if you're within 3, then like, you probably would just want to run the math on it. Like, is this going to be better than Stomp? Are you just going to roll a 1 and then miss, or on average, do you do a lot more damage with your breath weapon? I don't know. I'm not impressed by this. I guess I'll just quickly check out the Terrorgeist. I think the Death Shriek is exactly the same as before. It's +6, so you don't use the attack sequence. You roll a dice and add this value, and if you're higher than the bravery, you cause wounds equal to the difference. So you don't have to like hit and wound. I think that's okay, but it's like heavily dependent on your opponent's bravery, and if they've got a high bravery, then you just don't want to have the Terrorgeist in your army. But if they have a low bravery, this will cause quite a lot of damage, doing it 2 or 3 times. I still don't think you take this unit, so I'm really just considering the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and his breath weapon is something that you're not super excited to use with this. But worth noting, you can stack it and combine it with some of the other things here. Makes it a little bit better. Anyway, that's enough on that. I spent way too long on it. Command traits. Rulers of the Night. Above suspicion. During deployment, instead of setting this general on the battlefield, you can place them to one side and say that they are set up in ambush as a reserve unit. If you do so at the end of your movement phase, you can set this general up on the battlefield more than 9 from all enemy units. This is trash. This is bad. The reason it's bad is because at the start of your turn, you get, like, if you go first, you get 1 command point, and then you get another command point just for the start of the turn. That's not for the start of the turn. That's only if your general is on the battlefield. So if your general's not on the battlefield, like if he's in reserve, you don't get command points. So this costs more than a command trait. It also costs a command point every hero phase that he's in reserve. And if you go like second, then it costs you 2, right? Because you can't put him down in the enemy's movement phase. And then your movement phase is after the start of your turn. So you cost at least 2 command points if you go second. It's just not worth it, right? And it has to be on your general. It's a command trait, right? If it was an artifact, then it would be okay. You can put it on some dude that doesn't matter. But this has to be on your general. I think this needs an errata that says you still get your command points while he's in reserve. And if that was the case, this gets a lot better. I think the other thing that makes this less bad is that you have a lot of double jennies in the book. You can take this with Manfred, or you can take this with one of the other double jennies. That way you still get your command points, and then you can summon this guy from reserve. I don't know why you want to put your general in reserve. There's like a small tactical play you can do by putting a Vampire Lord or a White King near a unit, and then I think their buffs work in the combat phase, so you can sort of land near a unit and then buff them. But you have to be 9 away and make the positioning a bit awkward. They could probably just walk up the battlefield with whatever it is they're going to buff. If he's a Vlozid, he'll move faster not in reserve. And he won't be able to charge because you don't get any charge bonuses in the book. Generally, this is bad. I don't think anyone will take this. I can only imagine like a really niche set of circumstances where you might even think about it. But I just really don't think you're going to do this, especially since you've got Swift Form. All right, you can just put your dude on the battlefield and then use a heroic action to teleport him anyway. If you want to be 9 away, just put your dude on the battlefield and use Swift Form. Like, this shouldn't exist. This is bad. This is horrible. All right, debate. This is quite good. While this general is on the battlefield, add 1 to save rolls and ward rolls for attacks that target friendly Legion of Night summonable units in the first battle round. Okay. Doesn't have anything to do with where the general is. So I guess it's, it doesn't feel like a command trait, a bit like the Crimson Keep command trait. But this is a good ability, and it affects all of your summonable units. Before it was, I think it said Dead Walker and Death Rattle, which I think incidentally was all your summonable units. But now it just says summonable, which is nice. And it's +1 to save rolls and ward rolls, which is huge. Absolutely huge. It's worth noting that this isn't just like the old Gravesand Shard used to give you +1 to your Deathless Minions ward rolls. This is any ward roll. And there are ways that you can get better than a 6-up ward in this book. One of them is Nagash. Right? Nagash can give you a 5-up ward, and I think it's either a bubble or it's like to everything. I think it's a bubble, like a 12-inch bubble. So potentially you can stack a big unit of like 30 skeletons and have a 4-up ward and +1 to its save on turn 1, and you can just drop that out of a gravesite onto like the midfield objective and just say, come at me. All right, you're not going to kill 30 dudes with a 4-up ward save. I think this has a place. I think there's a good benefit for it. Black Knights still have high movement, and actually they got better. This is very good for Black Knights. It's good for Direwolves as well. I think Direwolves make a bit more use out of this as well. Not as good on zombies, but lots and lots of use out of this. I think this is a good command trait. Sad that it's only the first battle round. If you go second, often this does a lot less because like your opponent will. Not if you go second, but a lot of the time, the first battle round, nothing really happens. In the second battle round, it's really important. So if it was the first 2 battle rounds, it would be so much nicer. But you know what? I'm still taking this. +1 to save rolls and ward rolls is a lot of extra durability on some units that they can now really take a hit, right? It stops you being blown out in turn 1 and gives you a lot of alpha pinning potential, I think, with that big block of 30 skeleton warriors, which is something I really like to do with this army anyway. So this I might actually use. I might use the bait. Master of Magic still right up there, still probably the choice, But the bait, I think, the bait's not bad. Unbending Will. Models in Friendly Legion of Night summonable units count as 2 models instead of 1 for the purposes of contesting objectives while they're wholly within 12 of this general. Okay. A bit of awkward wording. So models count as 2 while the models are wholly within 12 of this general, or models in Friendly Legion of Night summonable units count as 2 while the units are wholly within 12. I assume they mean the units, because wholly within kind of makes more sense for units than models, but can work both ways. And English-wise, if I was reading this sentence like a normal human being with no understanding of like the types of rules they make, if I was just reading this with normal English, I would assume the they here applies to models, not units. What models are the like, I don't know what the English term is. They're the subject of the sentence. They're what we're talking about. We're talking about the models. So the they is the models. Models that happen to be in units, those guys, while those guys are wholly within 12 of this general. This will make a big difference for how effective the ability is, because being able to improve models from 1 to 2 when you're half the unit is in is much better. You can snake out the rest of the unit way off the objective and do other stuff with them. To be fair, if you put this on like a Vampire Lord or something, you probably want to keep those models within 12 of the general just so they can get the buff. But I think this is good. Like a Velocid has a big base, and summonable units come with a lot of models. You can have 10 skeletons counting as 20. It can be really hard for your opponent to kill all the summonable things, and counting as 2, that's a lot. This used to be ignore Battle Shock, and I'm sad we still suffer from Battle Shock. They did slightly fix the accounting problem by changing the way the skeletons come back, but Battle Shock is still a big issue for the army, and we now don't have a way to ignore Battle Shock outside of just using Inspiring Presence. But that's fine. Again, we're not as command point hungry, so I'm sort of okay with this changing. And this is more interesting. And I think Legion of Night, to me, has always been the army of all the summonable junk. It's the army of bats and wolves and black knights and skeleton warriors and like just a lot of minions in particular. And so I think this is a good bonus. I think you can position it so like your general is between 2 objectives, and especially if it works the way where it's just the models that are wholly within, not the units that are wholly within, then you can count as having quite a lot of extra models. You can have like 20 extra models on objectives because of this command ability. So I think this is good. I think you'll see this. I think Unbending Will and Debate are both viable choices, and they might even compete for Master of Magic. I think there will be lists that take these and don't feel bad about it, right? So far, Legion of Night, A+, I guess a C for the monstrous action, a D on Above Suspicion, but like, B kind of thing. These are good. These are viable. I don't feel bad taking these. All right, Legion of Blood Legion of Night looking pretty good. Let's have a look at the artifacts. We used to have good artifacts, and I see they picked the 3 best ones from the previous book. So let's see what we got. Shard of Night. Ignore negative modifiers to save rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target the bearer. Okay, I think this is what it did before. Sometimes people take this. It depends how good shooting is in the meta, and it depends how much of that shooting is mortal wounds shooting, because obviously this does nothing about mortal wounds. I feel like if you had this ability just said 6s to hit miss instead, 6s to hit or re-roll 6s to hit made with missile weapons against the bearer, this would be much better, because then all those 6s to hit doing mortals units wouldn't do anything. But I think those units are getting weaker over time, and when they're strong because they proc on 5s as well as 6s, so that would get really messy and complicated. In general, this is an okay artifact if you're really worried about being shot. I I think it's a bit of a feels bad because you'll play against an army that doesn't have any shooting. And again, I feel like these sorts of things should be bundled in a way where you pick from two options. So you're like the Shard of Night at the beginning of your deployment phase, pick one of the following two effects. Either you have this anti-shooting ability, or you have like -1 to be wounded in combat or something, so that you sort of pick something that's useful, and it's useful no matter what. It sort of covers all your bases. I feel like they need to change the design philosophy on this sort of thing to allow some tailoring based on your opponent's army, given that this is only useful against certain types of opponents. Interesting that they call it a leather brigandine. I would have thought it would be a shard, like a gem or something. But yeah, this could have also been like mirror shield or something. This could have just said you can't shoot the general, you can't shoot the dude holding this artifact if you're not within 9 inches, and that would have been really thematic as well. I think like having a sort of like a darkness aura so that it's hard to see the guy if you're not close to him. I think that's more thematic for a vampire, but yeah, this is what we got. It's okay. I'm not super interested by it, but it's not bad. You might see it. Chiropteran Cloak, Chiropractor's Cloak. If the unmodified hit roll for an attack made with a melee weapon that targets the bearer is 1, the attacking unit suffers 1 mortal wound after all its attacks have been resolved. I think this is how this used to work. This is not a bad artifact. I think it gets better. Both of these get better, knowing that Velocids are much more durable than they used to be. One problem with Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragons was that they just sort of die. They're not quite as tough as they need to be. And these artifacts get better the tougher they are. And the big changes are they get more wounds and they heal more wounds with the hunger. So I think when you combine that change in durability with these two things, I think these get a lot better. And I imagine Chiropteran Cloak is actually quite good. You know, if you've got a lot of attacks in your enemy unit, rolling ones to hit happens, you could actually be facing a fair number of mortal wounds, and you might not even kill the guy. Like, if he stacks his armor save, and you have to throw a whole bucket of dice at him to kill him, because he's using Mystic Shield and all that defense and Finest Hour, then, like, you're going to have to roll so many ones just throwing attacks and attacks at him. Again, it would be nice if things like this worked against shooting. I get why this one doesn't, just like theme-wise, this is a bat cloak, so you have to be close enough that the cloak can hit you, like Doctor Strange style. But, you know, if you shot at him, the bats could fly off and retaliate. I don't know. I feel like it's worth the flavor fail to make things like this work against shooting, just so the game has less of a disparity between shooting and melee, and you don't need these like weird, this thing only works against shooting artifacts. You can just have an artifact that works when people attack you, or an artifact that works when you attack. But whatever. Like, this is good. I will take this on a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. I might take this on a Vengorian Lord. Same with Shard of Night. These are good things to put on really big, tough generals that will take a lot of attacks to kill. Morbeg's Claw. This is an old favorite, and obviously we're missing half the text, but I'm pretty sure it does exactly the same thing it did before. In your hero phase, if the bearer is more than 3 from all enemy units, you can say that they will carve sigils into the ground using Morbeg's Claw. If you do so, add 2 to the casting rolls for a friendly legion of night wizards, so you can't ally in a wizard and get the bonus, which is how it worked before. Wholly within 12, I think 12 was the range before, of the bearer, until your next hero phase. However, the bearer cannot make a normal move, run, retreat, maybe fight. I'm missing it. Attempt to charge until your next hero phase. The old one says you can't fight. So if they charge you, you're busy carving sigils into the ground and you can't hit back. Not a big deal, because usually the dude doing this is like a necromancer. But if this doesn't say fight, that's a neat upside. That's a neat change. I would assume that this is exactly the same as it was. Can't attempt to charge either, so you can't use like your Ageless Cunning to charge if you used Morbeg's Claw. I think this is fine. I think +2 to cast is very good. we lost, you'll see in a second, we lost the rerolls to cast in Vyrkos. So this is the best casting in the whole book, I'm pretty sure, is this, and the corpse card gives you +1. This is a fantastic artifact. I think a lot of the time you will see people take this on like a necromancer, and he's just going to use it basically every turn. Unfortunately, like sometimes you need to move your necromancer. It is a rough downside. And in the past, people would take like Arcane Tome. It was a bit of a toss-up between Morbeg's Claw or Arcane Tome, because with Arcane Tome, you could cast Van Hell's Dance and one of the necromancer spells. Now we can't take Arcane Tome, except on like maybe a White King. So I think Morbeg's Claw is going to be a really, really popular artifact. I think Legion of Night, given all this, like this is good, this is fine. There's no, like, I don't feel bad about that. The Bait, Unbending Will are good. The Corrupting Cloak, Morbeg's Claw, these are like really good options. And I think Manfred is good. Manfred lost a lot, but I think Manfred's really good too. I'm really excited about Legion of Night in this book, and I think this will show up a lot. I'm sad about the casting getting worse. We'll talk about the spell laws in this section, but I'm really, really excited for Legion of Night. I think this is going to be a stellar faction to play. It does so much more than it used to. Before, you got +1 to your save on those summonable units, and you've got some dudes in reserve, which you sort of already got anyway. So before, when I'm playing Legion of Night, I'm like, the only thing I get is Morbeg's Claw, and like a command trait that's okay. But now you've got a really good selection of stuff that does really interesting, useful things. I think moving this to a command trait and then using it on ward rolls as well, I think it gives you the extra bit. Like Skeleton Warriors, +1 to save like wasn't enough to put them in the midfield and have them survive. But +1 to their ward save, I think might be, even with the way the change to their get back up rule has impacted them. I think this will be one of the more common factions. Legion of Blood also looks really good. So Legion of Blood, Legion of Night, top of the list for me so far. We've got one more sub-faction to do, and then I think we'll look at the spell laws, and then I'm going to have a break. All right. Vyrkos Dynasty. All right, I'm just going to have a drink. The strength of the wolf is in the pack. We used to have a bit of a funny two of these. The strength of the pack is in the wolf. Strength of the wolf is in the pack. But we just have the one now. Clearly, the pack is more important than the individual wolf now. In the combat phase, after a friendly Vyrkos hero has fought for the first time in that phase, you can pick one friendly Vyrkos unit that has not yet fought in that combat phase, that is within 3 of an enemy unit, and that is wholly within 12 of that friendly Vyrkos hero. That unit fights it immediately. Okay, so this is a lot of text, but it's a very simple ability. It's just like the bodyguard thing. You fight with the hero, you can fight with another thing at the same time. Really straightforward. This bit of rule clarifies that if you use this ability you fight with your hero and you pull in another hero, you can't chain it and pull in another unit and another unit and another unit until you pull in a non-hero. You only ever get to fight with 2 things for the first time in that phase. This is a great ability. This is strong. It's strong because in the previous book we used to have something called Deadly Coordination that said if you have a unit with 9 or fewer wounds, so like a Vampire Lord, then you could attack with it and then get a summonable unit to fight. The big problem is that those heroes sucked and summonable units generally are not that good. Graveguard are possibly an exception there. Sorry. But now, this is any Vyrkos hero, so it can be Radukar, it can be a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, or a Vengorian Lord, or a Coven Throne, or anything, and any other Vyrkos unit that has not yet fought in that phase. So, like a wolf pack, you have a coordinated attack where both your guys attack at the same time. That's really useful. That's just activation war stuff. You do have to be wholly within 12, so you kind of have to charge together. But you don't have to charge. They can charge you if you're just standing near each other. You can activate the hero and then activate the unit straight away. This is a generically powerful ability. In the past, Soulblight hasn't hasn't engaged in the activation wars stuff very much. They got Skirgan True Blades right at the end of the previous edition, and they had a Fight's Last effect that was pretty good. And they kept that in this book. But this is really, really handy for just a generically good thing. You can use Blood Knights or Vargheists or whatever, of Velocid, Radikar. Very, very applicable. Sad that you can't combine it. I know we're missing these things now, but we used to have, I think it's called Unholy Impetus. And the problem with Unholy Impetus was you'd have to kill a model and then everything else around you would get +1 attack. But the problem is, if you activate with the guy with Unholy Impetus, it's a command trait, kill a model, then they get to activate and kill your unit of Graveguard that was going to get +1 attack. Manfred has the same issue. They have fixed that with Manfred, and we'll get to that. But unfortunately, you can't combine this effect with Unholy Impetus or that, because those things would have been in Legion of Night, and they're gone. So I'm not sure it has a synergy in this book. I'm not sure this goes anywhere with Vyrkos that is like really, really interesting, but it's generically quite good. It's a powerful, useful ability. And yeah, you don't have to be fighting the same thing, I think. It just has to be in combat as well and fights at the same time. Just gives you sort of like 2 activations for the price of 1, so long as one of the activations that you're doing is a hero. So hero focus. And like that hero focus, we have 2 heroic actions for Vyrkos and no monstrous action. One of them, I'll start with the second one first. This one lets you summon a unit of, it has to be a vampire hero, can't be a necromancer or something, and lets you summon a new unit of direwolves, of 10 direwolves to your army. So it's like a free 130 points just for playing Vyrkos and using a heroic action. And you can only do this once. You have to set it up wholly with the 9 of the hero and 9 away from all enemy units like normal. And yeah, you can only do it once. So this used to be on Radikar. He used to have to use a command ability to summon a unit of 10 direwolves. And you'll see when we look at Radikar, they didn't lower his points much to compensate for the loss of this 130 point unit. So my guess is Radikar might not be as good. For the points, he might need a point drop to really see play. But he did get an improved version of the Hunger, which might actually bring him back. But now, yeah, if you're Vyrkos, you just have 10 wolves. Worth noting, if you're going to play them, you have to have another 10 wolves somewhere. You get a free 130 point unit, which is quite good. I think that's neat. And it will... it's very likely you'll need more than just another unit of direwolves because of this heroic action. Pack Alpha. Pick 1 friendly Vyrkos Vampire Hero, then pick 1 friendly Vyrkos Deadwalkers unit, and to my knowledge, direwolves and zombies are Deadwalkers. Within 12 of that hero and visible to them, you can add D3 models to that unit. So you get D3 direwolves, you just add them to the unit. Note, this ability allows a friendly Vyrkos Deadwalkers unit to be taken above its maximum unit size. So in your hero phase, you get another D3 direwolves. In their hero phase, you get another D3 direwolves. In your hero phase, you get another D3 direwolves. You can just keep stacking up and making this unit bigger. That's really fun. I don't know if it's good. Direwolves are not good. But, you know, this is... It's equivalent to 2d3 wounds, because direwolves have 2 wounds each. So you can get a lot of wounds doing this, and you get the direwolf unit for free. So even if you don't buy any Deadwalkers, like, you're still able to do this. You do have to give up your heroic action for it, but I don't know. I think this is okay. Yeah, I think this is interesting. It's interesting that it just adds models to the unit. You don't have that problem like I talked about with the Deathly Invocation, where you're trying to heal a unit that's got a wound and then add models to it. You just add the models, even if there's one that's wounded, you can just add more direwolves to it. That would have been another way that could have fixed that Deathly Invocation, is just by like not letting you heal with it and just adding models, because it's fine if you have a damaged unit and then add another full health model to the unit. Like, it's actually doesn't ruin anything, as evidenced by this ability. So I like this. I think these are fun. I don't know if these things are very good. I don't know if this thing is very good. Kin of the Wolf is fine. That's good. A free unit of direwolves is nice. 130 points just for free. I think that's very, very handy. You could save it for a bit later in the game so you can get the direwolves where you need them. Wholly within 9, they can't move in the following movement phase, so you can't do like cheeky, can't summon them, then move and charge in the same turn. That makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's not too much to say about them. Just this is a generically powerful ability. 130 free points is good. Direwolves are fine. And adding more guys to a thing is a good heroic action to be doing. It's a bit like heroic recovery, but you can do it when you're at full health. You can just sort of keep adding stuff. You can do it while you're in combat. So yeah, I think this is good. There might be a keyword bingo thing here. If there's another dead walker I'm not thinking about, like if there's fellbats or dead walkers, then this might be really good. But I'm pretty sure it's just direwolves and zombies. So not bad. I think like B or C so far. We're not overpowered, but certainly usable. One thing I guess worth noting is that we're missing rerolls to cast, and we don't have +1 to wound, right? The book is very, very light on +1 to hit and wound. It's very hard to make our stuff perform better. And that used to be a big problem in the previous book, where you used to be sort of forced to take Manfred so that you could give your units +1 to hit and wound. Manfred doesn't do that anymore. Almost nothing in the book does that anymore. So worth noting, Vyrkos don't have that bonus, that +1 to wound bonus that would have been really good, and they don't have the rerolls to cast. I think this is the main reason Battletome got cheaper, because if you look at her War Scroll, she actually kind of gets better in a lot of ways. Worse in some ways, but the big thing I'm noticing from Vyrkos is that there's no casting bonus at all, right? It's not that it went from rerolls to cast to like +1 or something. Nothing at all, which is a bit sad because they fixed Locus of Shyish. I was a bit excited in the previous book when I saw Vyrkos get rerolls to cast and unmodified 9-ups give us bonus effects because those are synergistic. Your reroll has a higher chance of giving you an unmodified 9-up compared to the old Legion of Sacrament that was like +1 to cast when really you want unmodified 9-ups. But then they ruined all the spells, so it didn't matter anyway. Particularly they ruined all the vampire spells, so having rerolls to cast on vampires was really sad. Here we just don't have rerolls to cast, and now we have a useful Locus of Shyish. We're never ever going to get the two at the same time. We're never going to have a good casting bonus and good spells at the same time. This edition it looks like we're getting slightly better spells, but we're not having the good casting bonuses. I think the combination of all this means that if you want to do good magic, you're either going to be Legion of Blood, because you're getting +1 to cast on most of your heroes, on your vampire lords. You want to be Legion of Night, so you can get +2 to cast for everyone near Morbeg's Claw. Or I guess you're taking Belladamma because she has a natural +1 to cast. But that's the best we got. It's not, we have like very, very sparing casting bonuses. You can get a corpse card or something, but big change there. If you're a fan of casting spells, then Vyrkos got a lot worse for you. But otherwise, I think they're pretty good. Command traits. Driven by Death Stench. You can reroll charge rolls for friendly Vyrkos units wholly within 9 of this general. That looks familiar. We've seen this before. This is the Kastelai command trait, except that it is 3 inches worse. This is swift and deadly, but instead of a 12-inch range, it's a 9-inch range. This is generically, it's an okay generic command ability. Rerolling charges is fine, but not very good. And you're definitely not taking this faction for this, because if you were, you would take Kastelai. So not a fan of this. I think they could have done something much more interesting. This is sort of the boring, bad option. I'm not very interested in this at all. Hunter's Snare. Hunter's Snare was good. Before we used to have 2 good Vyrkos command abilities. We had Hunter's Snare and Pack Alpha. We don't have Pack Alpha anymore because that's over here. And it used to give us a free command point, and like I said, this book is not as hungry for command points as it used to be. So maybe we don't need Pack Alpha anymore. But Hunter's Snare was very good before. and it's still good. It's the same thing. In fact, it's slightly better. For the purposes of contesting objectives, this general counts as a number of models equal to their wounds characteristic. So you used to have a Vlozard that was 14 for objectives. Vlozard's got another 2 wounds, so this is actually slightly better. You put this on your Vlozard and he counts as 16 for objectives. That's pretty good. That's just a solid, powerful ability. I'm not sure it really has anything to do with any of this flavor. It just sort of counts as a bunch of models for objectives. It's really neat. I think given these sort of artifacts and stuff, you can sort of afford to have a hero that sits back and doesn't do a whole lot. It is a lot of points for sitting back and not doing a whole lot, but he's also very durable and sort of pretty fighty, and the option for the weapon where he doesn't charge is a bit better. Before, you used to, in Vyrkos, you'd take like Sangsaron for another D3 attacks on the charge with the lance. Now I think you might even just take the sword and you might just sit there and like cast spells and stuff. But yeah, Hunter Snare was good before, is good now, just worth taking. It's probably the thing you take all the time in this faction. Much better than Driven by Death Stench. Spore Trackers. Okay, at the start of your hero phase, friendly Vyrkos Deadwalkers units wholly within 9 of this general can make a normal move of up to 3. That is very frustrating. We had this ability before, and it worked like this before. It's frustrating for 2 reasons. One is you have to be wholly within 9, and the best unit to buff with this ability is a unit of zombies. So your zombies have to be wholly in 9, and then they get to move 3 inches. And then because it happens in the hero phase, if you want to play technically correct, you have to move them 3 inches, and then in the movement phase move them 4 inches or whatever. Your opponent is probably going to be nice enough to you, and because you're on a clock, for its own good, will let you just add 3 to their movement and just say, I'm going to move them all now. We're just going to assume they move 3 in the hero, then another 4 later in their movement phase, but I'm just going to move them the 7 now. But it annoys me whenever you have to make a compromise like that, whenever you have to say, please opponent, can we agree to fix this rule so that it's actually playable? Can we just not make me move 60 models twice? That sort of annoys me. But there is an advantage. Like, it is technically better that the rule works in the hero phase than adds 3 to your movement in the movement phase. It does let you do things like you can move this unit into range of actually no, if you're within 9 then you're already within 12 of a hero. I think I said this earlier, but it doesn't even matter. Yeah, I don't know. There's probably some sort of combination being able to move them in the hero phase. It's just that you can only move 3 inches with it. It would be nice if it would just let them move in the hero phase. Then you could move, like direwolves could go another 10. That would be quite good. We know that's not overpowered. Like, pigs do a lot of damage and they can move 9 and then move again. Direwolves don't do any damage. It's probably fine to let direwolves that start wholly within 9 of the general move twice in the same phase. That would make this ability like actually kind of neat, but they don't do that. They don't do interesting things. They only add 3, so your direwolves aren't moving much further. And your zombies, as much as 3 inches is a lot extra for zombies, if they moved in the hero phase, they'd only be moving 4 instead. Like, it wouldn't be overpowered to just let them do a normal move because it's only 1 extra inch. I think you can see this, but I don't think you do. I think generally you will want Master of Magic, especially if you're taking a big 60 block of zombies. You probably want a Necromancer to cast Van Hels's Dance with a reroll. Yeah, I can't see this being good, and it's a huge pain in the butt to play. It also does some weird stuff because the healing happens. The Deathly Invocation happens in the hero phase, and this happens at the start of your hero phase. You can start within 9, and then I guess you have to be wholly within 9. So even if you move the 3, you're going to be within 12. Okay, cancel that. That's fine too. I think this is underwhelming. I don't want to take this just because it's a hassle to move things twice, and because moving dogs an extra 3 inches is nothing. I probably only see this in some of those big 60-man zombie lists, and even in that case, I think they're just taking Master of Magic. So my bet is you either take Hunter's Snare or Master of Magic. You take Hunter's Snare if you have a Velocid as your general, and then you take Master of Magic basically all the other times. All right, Artifacts of Power. Orphan-Carni Phylactery. This used to be Orphan-Carnian Phylactery. And they've changed this. Maybe I'm wrong. But this used to be horrible. This used to do nothing. In fact, all of the Vyrkos artifacts used to do nothing, except maybe Sangsaron for an extra D3 attacks on the Blood Lance on the charge. That was still bad. I think people should have just been taking Arcane Tome, because you get rerolls to cast. You can just make a vampire dude cast an extra spell, and he gets 2 spells that have rerolls to cast. Obviously, you're not getting the rerolls anymore, and you're not getting Arcane Tome, so it's good that we have better artifacts, because this set used to be the worst thing to look at. They basically may as well have printed nothing in the old Vyrkos artifact section. But now, I'm pretty sure we have good artifacts. So, Orphan-Carni Phylactery. Add 1 to ward rolls for friendly Vyrkos summonable units for the purposes of their 6-up ward while they are wholly within 9 of the bearer. This is really good. This is what I thought Gravesand Shard in Kastelai would do. Because it used to do this. It used to give you an extra 1 to your ward rolls in like a once per game aura. This, I think, is actually really good. You can give this to like a Necromancer that's babysitting a unit of 30 like Skeleton Warriors, and they will just have +1 to their ward all game. Like a 5-up ward. That makes them super durable. You can put them near a unit of Graveguard, and maybe Graveguard with shields. I don't know if they're going to show up, because I think the two-handed weapons are still the superior choice by a fair bit, but they did improve the shield Graveguard, and with 4-up save and a 5-up ward, they might, and like guaranteed you're getting 3 models back. That might be a thing. You might be able to squeeze in a useful version of like 20 Graveguard with shield and sword, and not feel bad about it. And yeah, I think this is a really, really good artifact. This works on all the summonable units. Works on White Kings too, so you could take a White King and give him this, and he would have a 5-up ward as well. You could put it on the White King on Skeletal Steed, and he can run around with a bunch of Black Knights, gives them a 5-up ward. I really like this. I'll take this often if I'm in Vyrkos, depending on how good these other 2 are. But yeah, I don't feel bad about this at all, which is a big change from the past, where it extended your 6-up ward aura range from 12 inches to 18 inches, which is useless. Absolutely useless. All right, Terminus Clock. At the start of the enemy hero phase, you can say the bearer will stop the Terminus Clock. If you do so, roll a dice. On a 3+ until the end of that phase, subtract 1 from casting rolls for enemy wizards. This is another case. This book has a lot of them where this thing was so bad in the past that they've like I think it's called anchoring bias. One second. The ability was anchored at such a low point that even though this is a dramatic improvement on what it used to do, I think it used to be once per game it would do this. Even though this is a big improvement, this is still bad, right? So, at the start of the enemy hero phase, you can say the bearer will stop the Terminus Clock. Of course, you do that. I don't know why it says, like, you can say that. You will be doing this. Why wouldn't you be doing this? All right? I guess if they have no wizards, just do it. All right? Just say, at the start of the enemy hero phase, roll a dice. You don't need to say or declare that you're doing it. On a 3+ until the end of that phase, subtract 1 from casting rolls for enemy wizards. Okay, so there's no range. That's nice. You don't need to worry about like having your guy stand really close before you have -1 to casting rolls. I don't know why it needs to be on a 3-up. Like if this artifact just said enemy wizards subtract 1 from the casting rolls for enemy wizards while this unit is on the battlefield. Would that be overpowered? Like, that would be good. That would be worth taking. It would be a bit boring. But this is also boring. This is the same thing, but with like a dice roll that you check. I don't think I'm taking this. I don't think I care about this. My opponent might just not have wizards. They might have wizards that like don't care about -1 to casting. It's not It's not as horrible as before. Like -1 to all their casting rolls does something. But like if they have a lot of bad wizards, like if they're playing Soulblight Gravelords, then this is good. But if they have like one wizard and he's techless and he auto casts his 2 spells or something, or it's Nagash and he's got like +3, even if he's casting a lot of spells, maybe he's just got good bonuses to him, or if they're playing like a Slaves to Darkness Sorcerer Lord that's rolling 3 dice or whatever, I feel like if the enemy army cares about the wizards, cares about casting spells, this is not going to be a big deal for them. And if they don't care, then it's also not going to be a big deal for them. So in general, I think this is a bad artifact. I think you don't take this. I think you never take this, especially when you got like this. This is good based on what you've got in your list. All right. I feel like you just take this so long as you have summonable units, and you probably have summonable units in a Vyrkos list. So good, bad. Standard of the Ulfin Watch. This also used to be horrible. I think this was like a once per game thing that like gave you command abilities, gave you command points on a 5-up for each time they used a command ability. So let's see how we go. If the bearer is on the battlefield, you can roll a dice each time your opponent spends a command point. On a 4-up, you receive 1 extra command point. Hey, that's pretty good. That's a fair few extra command points, right? Sure, your opponent can choose not to use a command to like starve you of command points, right? Like if you really need a command point for Inspiring Presence and you don't have any left, your opponent might choose to not use a command so that you don't get a free command point and then get your Inspiring Presence. But in general, your opponent gets like 3 or 4 command points if they're a normal low command point army. They get 3 or 4 command points a turn, and they generally want to use all of them. So this nets you like 1.5 or 2 command points on average. This is very good. I'm amazed. This is like the old pack alpha ability where you get a free command point every turn. This amounts to that, right? Your opponent is going to use sort of on average 2 command points. It does say every time they spend a command point. So like, I think I have to check it, but I think a lot of abilities say they can use a command without the point being spent. And I think newer abilities tend to say they can use it as though they spent a command point or something. I feel like there's a wording difference that'll make a difference for this. And you'd have to check the one in the book where if they get the free command point by rolling Heroic Leadership, whether that triggers this, because I don't think it does. But even still, even if they just use in a battle round, they get 1 for going first and then 2 for their general being on the battlefield in their turn and your turn, and you get 2 4-ups, or like they go second, you get 4 dice, you get 2 4-ups. That's still 2 extra command points. And then sometimes, like if you play against Pretenders, the new Slanesh book, or like the new OBR book, and your opponent is getting like 8 command points for some reason and using them all over the shop, then hey, like the better they're doing, the better you do. This is like a lose less. This is an excellent. If my opponent is spending 8 command points a turn, hey, I get like 4 extra command points. That's pretty handy. I'm pretty happy about that. Again, this book doesn't need command points as much as it did before, but like command points are good, and you don't have to be in range of stuff. You can put this on a guy and sit him in the very corner of the battlefield all game, and he will give you command points for free. I like this. I like this a lot. I think this is a real option, and it's a different option to this. This is like if you've got a summonable unit that you really want to not die, and then this is like if you don't have that unit, you just take this, and this is good. Yeah, I think the same with command traits. If you've got the like very specific 60 zombie list, maybe you take Spore Trackers, but you probably just take Master of Magic. And then other times, if you've got the Vlozzard, you take Hunter's Snare. Yeah, like I'm happy about this set of artifacts and this set of command traits. There are some misses, these two in particular, but you know, I mean, it's not a horrible bonus if you do end up taking it, but it's boring. These are okay. Like adding D3 dire wolves is cool. It's fun. Adding 10 wolves is fun too. It's like you get more units in your army. I think it's always helpful having another 10. And we used to have like a command trait to get 5. I don't think 5 is enough, but 10 is another 20 wounds. Like dire wolves are pretty good. So you've always got a unit that you can add things to with this heroic action. I think these are neat. And I think this is pretty good too. There's not a lot of synergy here with this, I think. But I guess it works with Radikar. Radikar, like, when he charges, he gives another unit +1 attack. So you can attack with Radikar and then attack with the other thing. And they both have the, like, +1 attack that he gives them. So there's a bit of a bonus there. But yeah, Vyrkos, very sad to see the rerolls of casting go. We don't have a faction. We don't have like a good casting bonus anywhere in the book now, which would be relevant when we look at the spells. But I still think this faction is really good. I'm wondering about the identity. Like if I'm playing a big block of 30 skeletons, I've got a very, very big emphasis on summonable units. Do I want to take the bait for, you know, +1 to save and ward on the first turn? Or do I want to take Ulfankani Phylactery for, you know, +1 to ward the whole game? You know, do I want Hunter's Snare because I'm playing a Vlozzard, or do I want Swift Form and Ageless Cunning and like Corruptum Cloak? This is going to be, I think it's really interesting. These are going to be interesting choices for which subfaction you want, and I think like before, you can take some. You can take the same list in different subfactions. End up doing pretty well. All right, I'm very excited to try these 3 out: Vyrkos, Legion of Blood, and Legion of Night. I'm not as keen on Kastelai and Avengorii. I think partially because for Avengorii, I just don't like the idea of I don't like the Soulblight monsters that much, and the ones I do like, I like the Vlozzard, so I just play Legion of Blood or something. Kastelai, maybe. I'm a bit excited about Kastelai. But yeah, the things that they cut out, like I miss Unholy Impetus, maybe, but I also don't miss it. I think the way it used to work was kind of janky, and they'd have to add more rules for it to really work properly. So I think they made some good cuts. They made some good changes. A couple of things that I'm sad about, like Above Suspicion is just disappointing. I think Shard of Night could be better. This Terminus Clock just is still not good. Death Stench, Spore Trackers, like it's not an ideal book, but going from like 6 bad artifacts to 2 good ones, I think that's a big improvement. And this is better than it was before as well. So even though we're like down the Arcane Tome, I think I feel happy about taking these instead of Arcane Tome anyway. So overall, I think the subfactions are a good set of changes. I'm not quite done with this section yet. I want to look at the spell laws, and then I'll probably cut it there and have a bit of a break, and we'll look at the War Scrolls maybe tomorrow. But yeah, let's do these spell laws. All right, we're down to 3 spells in each law instead of 6, but hopefully they are good spells. All right, hopefully we have something worth casting, particularly in Law of the Vampires, which used to have nothing in it, almost nothing. All right, Soulpike. Soulpike is a spell that has a casting value of 6. I think that's what it was before, and a range of 24. Ooh, this has gone up. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within range and visible to the caster until your next hero phase. If that unit makes a charge move, roll a number of dice equal to the charge roll for that charge move. For each 4 up, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. And then the Locus of Shaiish effect here you can pick 2 different enemy units if you roll an unmodified 9+ instead of 1. All right. This is the same effect with a 6-inch extra range, but I think the 6 inches extra range makes all the difference, particularly with this effect. This is what it used to do when you rolled a 9-up, because the previous edition of Soul Pike, the previous edition used to say you can't apply this effect to the same unit twice. So you used to have to pick 2 units if you got the unmodified 9 anyway. The problem was that at 18 inches, most battle plans, you're either 22 inches away, because you've got like an 11-inch deployment and they've got an 11-inch deployment, or your territory goes all the way up to the middle and you're both 9 away, so you're 18 away from each other. There are very few scenarios where if you had corner deployment, for example, and you had to be 9 away from enemy territory, that you could be about 15 away from the enemy, just because you're like, with some trigonometry, you can actually get a bit closer than 18. So you can start in range with Soulblight in some battle plans, but they have to there's a really small area that does that. Now, in basically every battle plan, you can put a dude that knows Soulpike in range of the front of their deployment zone. And in the 18-inch ones, you can get a full 6 inches into their deployment zone. This is really, really valuable because a lot of enemy units will start 18 inches away from you and then charge you. This is like Ironjaw's pigs move twice. They move 9 in the hero phase and then they move 9 again. And if you're 18 inches away, which is how far they start, that means they can move to within 3 of you and then charge you. And then you're dead, right? So what's the point of casting a spell on an enemy unit to damage them when they charge you when they're out of range to cast a spell and then they kill you? And that's the 2 options. It just didn't work because you needed a lot of range. And I think the 2 options to fix this would have been to make it like a buff for your guys. It's like, like we're setting up a screen of pikes. They're like magical pikes. So when you charge my unit, regardless of what you charge that unit with, when you charge it, you take the reverse ogre charge damage, or extend the range dramatically so you can pick enemy units and get to them, apply the debuff before they actually attack you. And I think I think either of those options would have been fine. They've gone with the longer range. I think that's good. I think it makes this ability usable. Soulpike was always kind of a runner-up. In the Lore of the Vampires, you used to have Soulpike, I think, on range 18, and then Amethyst and Pinions as the actually good spell in the lore. So Soulpike, extra 6-inch range. I'm keen to see it work. I still think this is not an enormously powerful spell, but with this kind of range at 24 inches, you are getting some use out of it. And if your opponent has units that they like, heavy hitting combat units, which usually they do in Age of Sigmar, they'll have some sort of hammer, and it's probably going to be some fast moving high damage thing. They want to get it in combat, and on some rare occasions they'll have like a 3d6 charge unit, which is kind of fun to put these on as well. And you can end up doing on average like 3 or 4 wounds to it. Of course, they can mitigate it by, if they get really close and then they reroll their charge to reduce the value, then I think like they can mitigate it a little bit. But one thing I have to check: roll a number of dice equal to the charge roll for that charge move. So it doesn't use the unmodified value either. So it punishes your opponents for having bonuses to their charge, which I think is really handy as well. In general, I don't mind this spell. I think it's handy. It's not, it's not the most overpowering spell in the world. I think in the previous edition I cast it once. I think you'll get a lot more chances to cast this and to see what it does. In general, it does like, I guess, let's say 4 mortal wounds, just like on average, based on they're going to roll a 7 and then assuming they have +1 to their charge, like just before we take into a consideration that they might re-roll that to make it smaller if they don't need as big a charge or things like that. And then maybe, if they have 3d6 charges, it does more and all that sort of stuff. On average, I think you do about 4 mortal wounds with this. And that's not horrible for a spell, but it's not great either. It's not like Scraggarot's spell or anything. It's not hugely threatening. Your opponent isn't going to worry too much about, I have to deploy my guys at least 2 inches back off the line so that when we're 22 away, they can't reach me with Soul Pike on turn 1. I just don't think it's that important. It does punish people in the double turn a bit if they're like, they charge your screen and take some damage and then kill it, and then they double turn you and charge the next thing. Soul Pike is kind of handy for that. So I think I like the idea of the spell. I like the placement of it in Soulblight as an army. I just don't think it does enough damage to really scare people away from charging. But, this is an improvement. 24 inches is one of the changes that really needed. All right, File Transference. This spell in the previous edition, when it was printed, I think claimed the crown for the worst spell ever printed in Age of Sigmar. When it was printed, I think it might have been range 3 or 6. It might have been 3. And you pick an enemy unit and you roll dice equal to its wound characteristic, and on each 6-up, you healed a wound. You didn't even do damage to your enemy when it was printed. Like, that is nothing. It just does nothing. So let's see how they've gone. All right, this is, again, I think we might have this anchoring problem like with the terminus clock, right, where it's so bad to begin with. How much better does this need to get to be good, right? Back in Legions of Nagash, this was just like an 18-inch range, does D3 mortal wounds, heals a unit within 6 for the amount of damage, or for D3, whatever it was. It was fine. It was like a better Arcane Bolt. Let's see. File Transference is a spell with a casting value of 6 and a range of 9. Okay, 9 is better. I think it was either 6 or 3 before. 9 is the same range as Curse, and Curse is apparently quite a good prayer. People like Curse. So if the effect is good enough, a range of 9 is acceptable. Okay? We can accept this. Casting value of 6 is fine. Range of 9 is acceptable if this effect is good. Let's see. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. Roll a number of dice equal to that unit's wound characteristic. Okay. For each 5-up, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound, and you can heal 1 allocated to the caster. Alright. If you get a 9-up, the target suffers 1 mortal wound, and you can heal 1 for each 4+ instead of each 5+. Okay. This is a big improvement. Before, if you got the 9-up, you just did it twice. So you did the 6-ups twice, which is pretty close to going to a 5-up. All right, very similar sort of statistics on that. But this, you start on the 5-up, so this is already twice as good as what File Transference used to be. And now the unmodified casting roll going up to a 4-up, that's double and a half. This is a lot of damage compared to the old File Transference. All right, instead of just on 6-ups, you're now on 4-ups on the 9-up. So let's think about it. Against most units, this is useless. All right, most units of things are like 1 or 2 or 3 wounds. So against like a 3-wound unit, a unit of cavalry or something like that, this does 1 mortal wound and you heal 1. Not worth casting. Better off if you took like Flaming Weapon, or if you just cast Mystic Shield, or even Arcane Bolt would do more damage than this against just a random unit. But what about against like heroes, like small heroes? Against a 6-wound hero, this on average, this is doing about 2 wounds. If you roll the 9-up, 3 wounds. That's starting to look okay. That's like, against a hero, this is about equivalent to an Arcane Bolt. And then you got this upside of maybe healing. Like if you've taken damage, you can heal. The downside is that it's range 9, but like, maybe Arcane Bolt arguably really has a range of 3. So it's starting to look a bit better. I still, that's not looking better than Flaming Weapon, does my Velocid really want this over Flaming Weapon? I don't know. When we start looking at big wound models, the math on this starts to look a bit better. If we look at, let's say, a 12 wound enemy, we're starting to do 4 wounds on average, up to 6 wounds on the 9-up. If we look at a bigger model still, like a Gargant, it could be like 30 wounds, and we're doing, what's that, like 6 or something? No, 10. Why did I say 6? We're doing 10 wounds to a 30 wound Gargant, and then it goes up to 15 mortal wounds. You don't really want to be within 9 of a Gargant, but it can start getting awkward for your opponent's big monsters to be around your big monster. And I think that's kind of neat. I think you might see some people take this. It's getting better. I still don't think it's as good as Flaming Weapon. I think you'll probably just take Flaming Weapon. But like, you really want to be on a Velocid or something, because you could only heal the bearer. You can't, like the old Legions of Nagash Vial Transference used to be able to heal something near you, but you have to heal the thing casting this. So really, I think the use case is my Velocid is fighting a bunch of your dudes, and he's going to drain some life out of someone and heal himself. And it really only works against high wound enemy models. They might not even have any in their army. Compared to Flaming Weapon just increases your damage by a bunch. So yeah, I think you probably just take Flaming Weapon on the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. I don't see this coming up very much. Maybe there's something I'm missing, like a certain combination of things. Like if you've taken the Legion of Blood Ethereal Amulet, you're a lot more durable. And like if you combine this with the Hunger, you can make a guy that actually heals a ton of wounds in a turn. But I just ain't seeing it. It's definitely improved. It feels good to have the vampire-y spell be a bit better. But I just don't think it's going to cut the mustard. I don't think we take this over Flaming Weapon. Because on average it does like 2 wounds to the smaller dudes, whereas Flaming Weapon on average is going to improve your output by more than 2. I don't know though, like maybe you take it and you just cast Mystic Shield and Arcane Bolt the other times, and then when this comes up, then you've got this, and it does, it gets really good in the situation that it's good. But I don't know, it's like Curse, but it only works against dudes that have a ton of wounds or something like that. But at least it's not limited. They could have had like 2 a maximum of sneaking in here, and it doesn't have that. So I don't know. It might need to see this in practice to see whether it actually works. Okay, Spirit Gale, and notice no Amethyst's Pinions. I think a lot of people will be sad to see that spell go, but I'm not. It was a good spell, but I think it was a good spell because it was the only spell that did anything in the lore of the vampires. I don't think it's a particularly vampire-y spell. I don't think we needed it, especially. Maybe we needed it back in Legions of Nagash, when we had to move our heroes to grave sites to actually summon units out of them. You would cast Amethyst and Pinions to get to a grave site really far away to summon a unit out of it. But in the previous book, I think it was just gravy. It was just extra movement, and movement's always good, but it didn't necessarily feel like anything the army should have been doing. We just got like extra movement. And in return, I think dudes are a bit slower because they don't have this spell, but they're a bit more fighty because they have the better version of the Hunger. They've got slightly more wounds, and I think we're just going to transfer into Flaming Weapon. It was always sort of, do you want Flaming Weapon or do you want Amethyst and Pinions on like your Velocid before? I think you got a much more reason to take these spells. These are much better than they were before. I don't feel bad about our spell lore. All right, Spirit Gale. Spirit Gale is a spell that has a casting value of 7. If successfully cast, each enemy unit on the battlefield suffers 1 mortal wound. If the unmodified casting roll for this spell is a 9+, and the effect is not unbound, after the effect of this spell is resolved, you can immediately resolve the effect on this spell a second time. So they'd take 2 wounds. This is good. This is like, it depends how many units your opponent has and how much like healing. In some matchups, this will be like I do 2 wounds to everything, and then the opponent's like, oh, I'm playing trolls, and I just heal them all back at the start of my turn. Okay, but in most matchups, this is actually a fair bit of damage. Your opponent is likely to have between like 6 and 10 units. The battle regiment is 8, right? So a lot of people will have 8 units in particular, because they'll want like 3 good units, 2 chaff, and like 3 heroes. So this does sort of 8 mortal wounds. Yes, it is spread out everywhere, and I hope your opponent has a lot of wound trackers. But in general, it's a good spell for your backfield dude who he can just cast this every turn. Okay, like it's a bit like, I think there's a Stormcast one where just anything they can see just takes D3 mortals. It's a bit like that, where just the dude the vampire who's sitting back babysitting some unit of guys, or the necromancer who no one's in range for his Van Helsing. Actually, a necromancer can't have this. Sorry. Your vampire who's just out of range for his other stuff. He generally wants to sit around babysitting some unit. I think this is fine. I think you can cast this every turn and feel good about it. You can have Soul Pike on one vampire and Spirit Gale on another, and be happy casting Spirit Gale every turn. It's just like, it doesn't get in the way, and it's always good. It like always does something. Can cause a lot of sort of battle shock triggers against the right army if you use things like Horrorghast. But yeah, no, I think just spraying mortal wounds across your opponent's entire army just kind of adds up. It'll be useful, and you won't feel bad about it. Certainly better than the old Spirit Gale, and better than, we used to have something called like Blades of Shaiish. And Blades of Shaiish was, I think you cast it, and then everything within 12 on a 3-up took a mortal wound. This is a massive glow up to that. This is everything on the entire battlefield on anything up just takes a wound. And this is the kind of thing that I've been saying when I looked at the old spell lore. I'm like, the amount you can push this ability of like, oh, it's doing 1 wound. Well, you could have an unlimited range on this and it still not be overpowered. This is proof of that. This is still like, I'm still not certain this is the ability I want to take. But most of the time, I'm probably going to want a wizard who casts this. I'm probably taking a Vampire Lord, and I don't know, like the Vampire Lord on foot really cares about Vial Transference, so he's either going to cast Soul Pike or he's going to cast Spirit Gale. And I might have 2 Vampire Lords, so I might give 1 Soul Pike and I might give the other Spirit Gale. I can't remember. I might just quickly check. If we look at Manfred. Oh, wait, no. Does it still have it? He just says... It says Mortarch. What's the spell lore say? Vampire Wizards, Mortarchs, and Death Mages. Okay, so... all the Manfred's a wizard, vampire, sorry, so he can take these, but he's also a Mortarch, so he can take these as well. So that hasn't changed. The Mortarchs can still take all these, but like if you're playing Belladamma in Vyrkos, Belladamma might take Soul Pike, and then your Foot Vampire Lord might take Spirit Gale, right? And you don't feel bad about it. So I like these. I think these are good. They're much, 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 much better than previous. They're still not as good as I want them to be. There's still no spell here that returns like 10 zombies or skeletons to a unit. It's amazing to me that the Necromancy army doesn't have a spell that like does Necromancy. But hey, these are good, and I'm not complaining. All right, better finish this off. The cats are getting hungry. Lore of the Death Mages, Mortarchs and Death Mages wizards. Fading Vigor. Fading Vigor is a spell that has a casting value of 8 and a range of 18. If successfully cast, pick 1 enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. Subtract 1 from the attack's characteristic of that melee weapon to a minimum of 1 until your next hero phase. If it's a 9+ and not unbound, you subtract 2 from the attacks instead of 1. This is actually a nerf. This used to be exactly what it said before, except the way Locus of Shaiish interacted with Fading Vigor was that you could pick 2 units, or you could pick the same unit twice. So now you can only pick the same unit twice, and it's a bit of a feels bad if you pick a unit that has 2 attacks, then you get the 9-up, and you reduce their attacks by 2. It doesn't do anything. But of course, a unit that has 2 attacks base is the best target for Fading Vigor, because it halves their damage compared to, if they have 4 attacks, it only reduces their damage by a quarter. So I think like the mathematical mechanics of this is really unfortunate. But at least, and this is a big bonus for a couple of these spells, at least you cast the spell first and then pick targets. A lot of people do this wrong when they play Age of Sigmar. They will say, I am casting Mystic Shield on this. You don't need to pick your target. You don't need to tell your opponent what you're going to pick before you roll. I'm casting Mystic Shield, roll your dice. Then if you're successful, you say, once it's not unbound, right? Once your opponent makes the decision whether or not they're going to unbind it, then you pick the target. Sometimes you'll say, I'm going to cast Mystic Shield on this. Your opponent thinks, you're putting Mystic Shield on the wrong thing. I'm not going to unbind this. I was going to unbind it, but now I know that you're putting it on that useless unit. You can have it, mate. So you don't need to tell your opponents what you're targeting before you cast, and that's really important for Fading Vigor and for Prison of Grief, and I think maybe for Waste Away. If you cast this and you get the unmodified 9, you might decide to put it on a different unit because it's -2 attacks instead of -1. Because you might be picking a unit that had 2 attacks base and just reducing it by 1. And now, because you got -2, you might pick a different target that has more attacks because that's going to have a better effect on them. So, worth noting, I think this is definitely a nerf from before, but because it's slightly less flexible, but still a very good spell. -1 attack is an excellent spell. I'm a little sad about 18, but it's something like Soulblight where it affects specifically the charge, should be higher range, whereas they could already be in combat, you cast it on them and it's still quite effective, so I'm okay with that. Prison of Grief. This used to be, I think, like a stops them moving on a 5-up or something. It's a big change for this spell. Prison of Grief is a spell that has a casting value of 6 and a range of 12. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. Until your next hero phase, the Strike's Last effect applies to that unit. And if you've got the unmodified casting roll on a 9-up, then its range is 24 instead of 12. So this sort of emphasizes what I was saying about you don't need to pick your targets first. Obviously, if you had to pick your targets before you cast the spell, then you wouldn't be able to use this effect. But you can say, I'm going to cast Prison of Grief, you roll the thing, and then once you find out that you got the 9-up, you can say, actually, I'm going to target this thing that's further away than what I was initially thinking I'll target. Or you can try and cast it when you're not even within 12 and hope for your 9-up. It's worth noting that this is a Slaves to Darkness spell. I think exactly this, with the casting value of 6 and the range of 12, and until your next hero phase, the Strike Last effect applies to that unit. And of course, we've got a better version of it, given we're getting this bonus on the 9-up. We don't have a heroic action for 3d6 to cast, but this is a good spell. Making your opponent have the Strike Last effect, the fact that it's only got 12-inch range is okay. It's sort of one of those things where your opponent charges your skeletons or something like that, and you absorb the hit. The necromancer that's sort of behind them casts that spell on the unit and makes them fight last, and then you get all of your other things to pile in and attack that unit, and you can sort of, because they're striking last, you can really get in there and attack with everything before they get to activate. So I think this is a good spell. Necromancers are cheaper now, so you'll have more access to this. Before, Necromancers were kind of expensive, and you might only have like the one for Van Hell's Dance, but now I think you might see a lot of lists that have like 2 Necromancers. It's going to be hard for Mortarks to like pick which thing they want out of this list. It might end up being like Prison of Grief might be quite a good choice for something that's getting in the mix like that. And I think worth noting for Manfred specifically that he can use that heroic action to be 9 away and then can cast Prison of Grief sort of in the same turn. He does, when he charges, he fights first anyway, so it's not necessarily that good on him for that reason, but just worth noting that he in particular can make use of these spells by teleporting with a heroic action and then casting these. Other vampires can use these ones, I suppose, in Legion of Night, but you'll notice like this thing you'll be out of range for. Spirit Gale, you would have been in range no matter where you were. Soul Pike's pretty long range, so it doesn't really affect that. There's just a unique little combination where Manfred can teleport using Swift Form, and then can use something like Prison of Grief or Fading Vigor or Waste Away. Just worth thinking about. So, last one. Let's get through this. Waste Away. Waste Away is a spell that has a casting value of 6 and a range of 18. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range, invisible to the caster. Until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons. Again, I don't know why it has to be melee weapons. By that unit, and subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that unit's melee weapons to a minimum of 1. And if you get the 9 up, you can pick 2 units. So you can't double stack this on the 1 unit to reduce the damage by 2 and wounds by 2. But you can pick 2 different units. That sort of makes sense. -2 to wound is not that good. The big change, this used to be called Decrepify, and Decrepify is such a cool name compared to Waste Away, but they're synonyms. I think the big advantage is that this doesn't have to target heroes. Decrepify used to be heroes only. To my knowledge, this targets everything. So it's much more applicable. -1 to wound is often as good as -1 attack anyway. If your opponent has like 3 attacks and you give them -1 to wound, that's -1 to wound on each attack, whereas -1 attack is like, the more attacks they have, the less effective it is. You can imagine if my opponent had 1,000 attacks and I gave them -1 attack, that does basically nothing to them. But if I gave them -1 to wound, that makes them miss a whole lot of damage, right? So the more attacks they have, the better it is to debuff the hit and wound instead of debuffing the attacks. And you're reducing the damage as well. So I think Waste Away is going to really weaken a lot of units that are otherwise very, very powerful. Like if I put this on a unit of Chosen, they go from 2 damage down to 1 damage, and their wounds go from 3s to 4s. This is a huge debuff for something like Chosen. And I think it's just worth taking. Range 18 is good, casting value 6 is fine. Being able to pick 2 units of it, I think that's a fine bonus as well. -1 to wound is always good, so getting an extra one on another unit is always a benefit. And then -1 damage might not always be applicable. So you might not have 2 units in 18 that have 2 damage or more, but if you do, then that's just a bonus. If you can get that off, you can really reduce the amount of damage your opponent is doing from a huge chunk of their army for quite a considerable amount of time. So I think Waste Away got improved from Decrepify. You can target anything with it now. Prison of Grief is much better. Fading Vigor, I think got a slight nerf, but was good before. So Lord of the Death Mage is still good. Lord of the Vampires got a lot better, thank God. It used to be horrible and not worth taking. But yeah, I think I'm happy with this. I'm excited to use Magic. Sadly, swings and roundabouts, we lost our good casters, but the wizards also got cheaper. Like necromancers are much cheaper. I think you're much more likely to see lists with 2 necromancers in them because of the way these spells look and how cheap they are. And yeah, I think I'm excited. I'm excited to use some spells, particularly I think that Morbeg's Claw with 2 or 3 necromancers will see some play in Legion of Night. These are really, really powerful debuffs. And these are pretty good too. So taking that Morbeg's Clawing and +2 to cast on 2 or 3 wizards, I think might be a valuable play for Soulblight. Sad to lose Amethyst and Pinions. Not so sad about losing Overwhelming Dread. I think with Waste Away like this, you get -1 to wound. It's about the same as -1 to hit. And your opponent can't just all-out attack to compensate for it. So, not sad about losing Overwhelming Dread. Never used Soul Harvest. I think I'm okay with the new Prison of Grief. I think this effect is better than the previous one. Yeah, I'm happy with the spell laws, happy with Legion of Blood, Legion of Night, and Vyrkos. not really fussed about Kastelai or Avengorii, although I think Vordry brings Kastelai up a little bit. But we'll get to him in the War Scroll section, which I might have to do tomorrow because I think my voice is getting a bit sore. This took me a lot longer to do than I thought it would. Hopefully you enjoy it, and yeah, I'll be back soon with the rest of the book. All right. Thank you, and goodbye.